When the elevator cable snapped, Ethan Cole had exactly 3 seconds to choose: save himself or save the woman who was about to destroy his life. Clara Vance, the billionaire CEO whose smart building would erase his daughter's home, didn't even know his name. But in that metal coffin suspended between floors, titles meant nothing. What happened in those trapped hours would rewrite a $3 billion empire and prove that sometimes the greatest innovations come from the people we overlook. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The morning started like every morning for the past 8 years, with Ethan Cole burning toast. He stood in the cramped kitchen of apartment 7B, watching smoke curl toward a ceiling that had needed repainting since his wife left. The toaster, like everything else in the Meridian Towers, was old, temperamental, and hanging on by sheer stubbornness. Kind of like him, he thought, as he scraped black crust into the trash. "Dad!" Mia's voice pierced through the bathroom door. "My hair won't do the thing." Ethan glanced at the clock, 7:47 a.m. His shift started at 8 and the building's main HVAC system had been making that grinding noise again, which meant Mr. Patterson from maintenance would be in one of his moods. But Mia's 8th birthday was today, and he'd promised her French toast before school. "Coming, sweetheart." He found her standing on the toilet lid, staring at a reflection with the fierce concentration of a surgeon. Her dark hair, so much like her mother's it sometimes hurt to look at, refused to cooperate with the sparkly clips she'd insisted on wearing. "Here." Ethan's large, calloused hands moved with surprising gentleness, gathering the strands and securing them. Years of fixing delicate sensor wires had given him an unexpected skill with his daughter's hair. "There. Beautiful." Mia beamed at him in the mirror. "Mom used to do it better." The words weren't meant to hurt, but they landed anyway. "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "She did." Rachel had been gone for 6 years now. Not dead, just gone. Somewhere in California with the yoga instructor she'd met online, living a life that apparently didn't have room for a struggling maintenance engineer and a 2-year-old. The divorce papers had arrived via FedEx. She hadn't asked for custody. "But you're getting pretty good at it," Mia added quickly, sensing his mood shift. At 8 years old, she was already too good at reading his silences. Ethan kissed the top of her head. "Get your backpack. We'll grab breakfast at Rosa's before I drop you off." "But you promised French toast." "I know, baby, but the toaster had other plans." He showed her the charred remains of what was supposed to be her birthday breakfast. "Rosa makes better pancakes anyway." Mia's disappointment lasted exactly 3 seconds before she was racing to grab her backpack, already listing the toppings she wanted. Ethan watched her go, feeling the familiar weight of inadequacy settle on his shoulders. Another promise broken. Another small failure in a long line of them. His phone buzzed. A text from Patterson. "HVAC down on floors 15-22. Need you here now. Perfect." "Mia, we gotta move." They tumbled out of the apartment together, Mia chattering about her birthday party, just her and Rosa's daughter Maria, because most kids from her school lived in different neighborhoods now, neighborhoods Ethan couldn't afford. The Meridian Towers had once been working-class housing, but the area was revitalizing, which was a nice word for pricing out everyone who'd lived here for decades. The elevator was waiting, its doors held open by Mrs. Chen from 8F, who was maneuvering her walker inside. "Morning, Mrs. Chen," Ethan said, holding the door. "Ethan, dear, and birthday girl." Mrs. Chen's face crinkled into a smile. 8 years old, my goodness. "I'm having pancakes," Mia announced proudly. "As you should." They descended in comfortable silence, until the elevator lurched. It was subtle, just a slight stutter in the mechanism, but Ethan felt it in his bones. He'd been maintaining these elevators for 5 years, knew every sound they should and shouldn't make. That wasn't normal. Mrs. Chen didn't notice, but Mia grabbed his hand. She always knew when something was wrong. The doors opened at the lobby, and they spilled out into chaos. The Meridian's entrance was packed with residents clustered around a large notice board. Angry voices overlapped, and Ethan caught fragments. "Can't just kick us out. My lease isn't even 3 months? That's insane." Ethan's stomach dropped. He pushed through the crowd, Mia still clutching his hand, until he could see the notice. Official notice of building acquisition. The Meridian Towers has been purchased by Vance Industries as part of the Horizon 2.0 Smart City Development Project. All current lease agreements will be terminated effective February 28, 2024. Relocation assistance packages are available through the words blurred. February 28th. That was 90 days away. Dad? Mia tugged his hand. What does it say? Around them, people were crying. Mr. Martinez, who'd lived here for 30 years, the Santos family with their newborn twins, young professionals who'd just signed leases, all of them suddenly homeless. It says, Ethan's voice came out rough. It says we have to move, baby. Move where? That was the question, wasn't it? Rent in the city had skyrocketed. Anything in Mia's school district was twice what he paid now, and he was already stretched thin. His ex-wife sent nothing. His parents were gone. It was just him, and he was failing the one person who mattered most. We'll figure it out, he lied. Rosa's cafe was subdued that morning. Everyone had seen the notices. Rosa herself looked like she'd been crying, but she forced a smile for Mia and brought out pancakes with extra whipped cream and a candle. Make a wish, mija. Mia closed her eyes, her young face serious. Ethan wondered what she was wishing for, probably something impossible, like her mother coming back, or a puppy, or for her father to not look so tired all the time. She blew out the candle. Everyone clapped. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Patterson, where the hell are you? I gotta go, sweetheart. He kissed Mia's forehead. Rosa's gonna take you to school, okay? I'll pick you up at 3 and we'll do something special. Whatever you want. Can we go to the Science Museum? Absolutely. Another promise. He hoped this one he could keep. But the Meridian's maintenance room was in the basement, a cramped space filled with decades-old equipment and the smell of oil and mildew. Patterson was already there, red-faced and sweating, staring at the HVAC control panel like it had personally insulted him. Finally, he snapped when Ethan appeared. System's been down for an hour. Got 50 people complaining about no heat. Ethan grabbed his tools without a word. Patterson was always angry about something, his ex-wives, his hemorrhoids, the city, life in general. Adding the building acquisition to his list of grievances would probably make his head explode. Did you see the notices? Ethan asked anyway, pulling open the access panel. See 'em. I got the call last week. They're keeping me on during transition at least. Maintenance staff for the new building. Patterson paused. You're on the list too, actually. Ethan froze. What? Yeah, they want experienced people who know the neighborhood. Decent pay increase, too. HR lady said you'd get a call this week. It should have been good news. Job security when everything else was falling apart. But something about it felt wrong, like being offered a life jacket by the person who'd just sunk your boat. What about everyone else? Ethan asked quietly. The families? Patterson shrugged. Not my problem, not yours either. We fix things, Cole. We don't make policy. Ethan wanted to argue, but what was the point? Patterson was right. They were just maintenance workers. Nobody asked their opinion about $3 billion development projects. He spent the next 3 hours wrestling with the HVAC system, a serpent's nest of ductwork and wiring that predated most modern building codes. The problem was deeper than Patterson thought. The whole system was failing, held together by patches and prayers. By 11, he'd gotten heat restored to the affected floors, but his hands were scraped and his uniform was filthy. He needed to clean up before picking up Mia. The elevator to the maintenance locker room was on the fritz again. That same subtle lurch he'd felt that morning, but worse now. The car shuddered as it climbed, and Ethan made a mental note to check the cables before his shift ended. He got off on the 10th floor, used the staff bathroom to wash up, then headed back to the elevator. That's when he saw her. Clara Vance was standing in the hallway, flanked by 2 assistants in expensive suits. Ethan recognized her immediately. Everyone in the city did. She was on billboards, magazine covers, TED Talks. The wunderkind CEO who'd built Vance Industries from a single software startup into a tech empire worth billions. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back so severely it looked painful. She was also furious. Completely unacceptable, she was saying into her phone, her voice cold enough to frost glass. "I don't care what the contractor says. If the sensors aren't installed by Friday, find someone who can get it done." She ended the call with a sharp jab and turned to one of her assistants. "What floor is the systems demonstration on?" 22nd, Miss Vance." They all moved toward the elevator, the same elevator Ethan was heading for. He hung back, hoping they wouldn't notice him. The last thing he needed was to share an enclosed space with the woman who was destroying his life. But the elevator arrived, the doors opened, and Clara Vance stepped inside without looking at him. Her assistants followed. Ethan hesitated. He could wait for the next one, should wait for the next one. But he was already late, and Mia would be disappointed if he wasn't there at pickup. He stepped inside. The doors closed. Clara Vance didn't acknowledge his existence. She was scrolling through her tablet, frowning at whatever she saw there. Her assistants stood at attention like Secret Service agents. Ethan pressed himself into the corner, trying to make himself invisible. The elevator began to climb. 10th floor. 11th. 12th. That's when it happened. The lurch this time wasn't subtle. The entire car jerked violently, throwing everyone off balance. Clara stumbled, catching herself against the wall. One of her assistants yelped. Then the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in sickly red. An alarm began to blare. 3 short bursts, pause, 3 more bursts. The elevator had stopped moving. "What's happening?" Clara demanded, her composure cracking. Ethan was already moving, hitting the emergency call button. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. "The system's down," he said, keeping his voice calm even as his heart raced. "Emergency lines not connecting." "That's impossible." Claire's assistant, a thin man with wireframe glasses, looked panicked. "This building has redundant systems, triple backups." "Yeah, well, they're not working." Ethan pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course not. They were in an elevator shaft surrounded by steel and concrete. Clara tried her phone too. Same result. Her mask of control was slipping. "How long until someone realizes we're stuck?" "Depends if anyone called it in before the system crashed." Ethan moved to the control panel, prying it open with his multi-tool. "Could be a few minutes. Could be longer." "Longer? I have a board meeting in 20 minutes. "With respect, ma'am, the elevator doesn't care about your schedule." The words came out sharper than he'd intended. Claire's eyes snapped to him, really seeing him for the first time. Her gaze dropped to his uniform, the Meridian Towers patch on his shoulder. "You're maintenance," she said flatly. "Ethan Cole. And yeah, I'm maintenance." He focused on the panel, trying to identify the problem. "The whole system's been glitchy for weeks. Someone should have reported it." "Someone did," Clara said coldly. "Multiple complaints, all resolved according to the system logs." "Then your system logs are lying." Silence fell, thick and uncomfortable. Ethan could feel her staring at him, could practically feel the temperature drop. "Do you know who I am?" Clara asked quietly. "Yeah." Ethan didn't look up. "You're the person who's kicking me and my daughter out of our home in 90 days. More silence. One of the assistants cleared his throat. "Ms. Vance, perhaps we should—" "Be quiet, Marcus." Ethan found the problem, or at least part of it. The safety brake sensor was malfunctioning, which had triggered an automatic shutdown, but fixing it would require tools he didn't have and probably violating about 6 safety protocols. "Okay," he said, turning to face them. "Good news and bad news. Good news is we're not falling. The mechanical brake's engaged, so we're secure. Bad news is I can't fix this from inside. We have to wait for rescue." "How long?" Claire's voice was strained. "Hard to say. Could be an hour. Could be 3. 3 hours?" Marcus looked like he might pass out. "Miss Vance has to present to the board about Horizon 2.0. If she's not there, then they'll start without me." Clara cut him off, but Ethan could see the tension in her jaw. This wasn't just inconvenient for her. It was a disaster. He almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I have to pick up my daughter," Ethan said, checking his phone again. Still no signal. "She's turning 8 today. I promised her the science museum." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because the silence was oppressive. Maybe because he wanted Clara Vance to see him as a person, not just a uniform. Maybe because he was scared and talking made him feel less helpless. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and something flickered across her face. It was gone too quickly to identify, but for a moment she didn't look like a CEO. She looked human. 8 years old, she repeated softly. I'm sorry you'll miss her birthday. I haven't missed it yet. Ethan slid down to sit against the wall, conserving energy. It was going to be a long wait. How long have you been planning this Horizon 2.0 thing? 3 years of development, 2 years of site acquisition and planning. And in all that time, did anyone tell you about the families you'd be displacing? Claire's expression hardened again. Relocation packages are being offered. Fair market value for lease terminations. It's all in the notices. Fair market value? Ethan laughed bitterly. You know what the fair market value is for my one-bedroom apartment? Not enough to rent anything in my daughter's school district, not enough to keep her in the same neighborhood, with the same friends, in the only home she's ever known. That's unfortunate, Clara said, and he could hear her retreating behind corporate speak. But necessary for progress. Horizon 2.0 will transform this area. Sustainable housing, integrated AI systems, reduced carbon footprint. For people who can afford it, Ethan interrupted. What about people like me? Like Mrs. Chen on the 8th floor, who's lived here for 40 years? Like the Santos family with their newborn twins? There are other buildings. Not anymore. This whole neighborhood's being revitalized, which is a fancy way of saying everyone who actually lives here is being pushed out. Clara's jaw tightened. I didn't create the housing crisis, Mr. Cole. I'm trying to solve it. By building luxury smart buildings that working people can't afford? By creating sustainable, efficient housing that… The elevator lurched again, cutting her off. Everyone grabbed for handholds as the car dropped several inches before the brakes caught again. The lights flickered. Marcus made a sound that might have been a whimper. Okay, Ethan said, forcing calm into his voice even as adrenaline flooded his system. Everyone stay still. Don't make any sudden movements. I thought you said the brakes were holding, Clara said, and for the first time he heard real fear in her voice. They are, but the cables are old, and if they're fraying, we could fall. We're not going to fall. You don't know that. She was right, he didn't. The Meridian's elevators hadn't been properly maintained in years. Not since the building changed hands 3 times in 5 years, each owner doing less maintenance than the last. He'd filed reports, made recommendations, begged for upgrades, all ignored because they cut into profit margins. And now he was trapped in a metal box that might be held up by fraying cables, with a CEO who probably thought maintenance was something that happened automatically, like magic. How old are your cables? Clara asked, as if reading his mind. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Mr. Cole, how old are the cables? Original to the building, he admitted. 1978. Jesus Christ. Clara pressed her hand to her forehead. That's 46 years. They've been inspected. When? By who? Ethan fell silent. The truth was, he didn't know. Elevator inspections were handled by an outside contractor, and he'd never seen the reports. He'd assumed someone was staying on top of it. Clara pulled out her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen despite the lack of internet connection. I have the building's maintenance records downloaded from this morning's briefing. Let me see. She scrolled, her face growing paler. Last comprehensive elevator inspection was 7 years ago, she said quietly. Everything since has been cursory at best. Boxes checked, fees paid, but no actual work done. That can't be right, Marcus said weakly. It's right here. Look. She showed him the screen. The previous owners cut costs by using the cheapest inspection company they could find, probably paid them to rubber stamp approvals without actually… The elevator groaned, a long, metallic sound that made Ethan's blood run cold. Something was shifting, straining. We need to get out of here, Clara said, standing up. Now! I told you, we can't… Then we make a way. She moved to the doors, trying to pry them open with her fingers. Help me! That's not safe. Neither is sitting here waiting for 46-year-old cables to snap. She had a point. Ethan stood, moving to the doors. They were sealed tight, designed to stay closed in exactly this kind of emergency. But there was an emergency release, not supposed to be used unless absolutely necessary, but then again, this counted as absolutely necessary. Everyone back up, he ordered. He pulled out his multi-tool, finding the small access panel near the floor. Inside was the manual release mechanism, essentially a lever that would unlock the doors. Using it meant the elevator would be permanently disabled until a full repair crew could fix it, but that didn't matter if they died waiting. "When I pull this, the doors will unlock," he explained. "But we don't know where we are in the shaft. Could be between floors. Could be lined up with a floor. Either way, don't do anything until I say so." Clara nodded. Marcus looked terrified. The other assistant, a woman who hadn't spoken yet, had her eyes closed, praying silently. Ethan gripped the lever. "Ready?" "Do it," Clara said. He pulled. The doors gave a pneumatic hiss and parted slightly. Ethan got his fingers in the gap and pulled, Clara joining him. Together they forced the doors open. Concrete wall greeted them. They were between floors. The bottom of the doorway to the 15th floor was visible about 3 feet above the elevator ceiling, the top of the 14th floor doorway 3 feet below. "Damn it," Ethan muttered. But there was a gap, narrow, but there. If they could climb through the ceiling access hatch and reach the 15th floor doors. "There's a hatch above us," he said, pointing up. "Emergency exit. If I can get up there and open it, show me." Clara was already moving, her fear transformed into action. This was someone used to solving problems, Ethan realized, used to not being helpless. He interlocked his fingers, making a step with his hands. "I'll boost you up. You're lighter than me. Get to the hatch, push it open, then help pull the others through." "What about you?" "I'll figure it out." For a moment, Clara just looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. Then she stepped into his hands. Ethan lifted, and she was lighter than expected, almost fragile. She grabbed the hatch, pushed, and it swung open. "There's a ladder," she called down. "I can see the 15th floor doors. Can you reach them?" "Give me a second." Clara pulled herself through the hatch with surprising strength. Ethan heard her moving around on the elevator roof, then the sound of metal scraping metal. "I need something to pry with," she shouted down. Ethan tossed up his multi-tool. More scraping sounds, then a grunt of effort. Then, miraculously, light. Clara had gotten the 15th floor doors open just enough to let in a wedge of fluorescent brightness. Not much, but enough. "Okay," she called. "Send up Marcus." They worked together, a chain of desperation. Marcus went up next, then the other assistant. Each time, Ethan boosted them up, and Clara pulled them through. It was exhausting, and every second the elevator groaned and shifted beneath them. Finally, everyone was out except Ethan. He stood alone in the red-lit car, looking up at the open hatch. The ceiling was just high enough that he couldn't reach it with a jump. He'd need something to stand on, but there was nothing in the elevator. "Mr. Cole!" Clara's face appeared in the opening. "Can you reach?" He jumped, fingers grazing the edge but finding no purchase. His second jump was no better. "There's a toolbox on the maintenance level," he called up. "If I can get the elevator to move—" "Don't you dare," Clara said sharply. "That car is barely holding as it is." "Then I'm stuck." "No, you're not." Clara disappeared, and Ethan heard her talking to someone, her voice commanding. A minute later, she was back. "Building security is bringing a ladder. 5 minutes." 5 minutes. Ethan sat down, suddenly aware of how much his hands were shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and the dawning realization of how close they'd come to disaster. "Mr. Cole?" Clara's voice echoed down. "Talk to me. I need to know you're okay." "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." He laughed weakly. "We almost died in your building." Silence from above, then, "I know, and I'm sorry." The apology surprised him. CEOs didn't apologize, in his experience. They deflected, blamed, made excuses. But Clara Vance sounded genuinely remorseful. "Why did you buy this building?" Ethan asked. "Because what else was there to do while waiting?" "Why the Meridian?" "Location," Clara answered. "Central district near transit lines, existing infrastructure. Perfect anchor point for the Horizon network." "That's it? Just location?" A pause. "What else would there be?" "People," Ethan said quietly. "There are people here. Lives. Histories. Mrs. Chen's husband died in apartment 8F 30 years ago. She's never moved because she says she can still feel him there. The Santos twins were born in the hospital 3 blocks away. This is their neighborhood, their home. I... Clara's voice faltered. I didn't know that. Because no one told you, or maybe they did and it didn't matter. That's not fair. Isn't it? Ethan stared up at the shaft of light. You're going to tear down this building and put up something shiny and new, something smart. But you know what's smart, Ms. Vance? Community. Neighbors who know each other's names. Rent that people can actually afford. That's smart. Everything else is just expensive. He didn't expect her to respond. What could she say? But after a long moment, her voice drifted down again. My mother was a janitor, Clara said softly. Cleaned office buildings at night. I'd go with her sometimes after school, do my homework in empty conference rooms while she vacuumed. I used to watch business people through the windows, in their expensive clothes, making important decisions. I promised myself I'd be one of them someday. Ethan listened, surprised. I built Vance Industries because I wanted to prove that someone like me could make it, Clara continued. Someone from nothing. And when I made it, I wanted to build things that mattered, things that would last. Horizon 2.0 was supposed to be my legacy. Sustainable, efficient, transformative. But I never thought about the janitors, Clara admitted. I was so focused on the vision, on the innovation, on changing the future. I forgot about the present, the people who are already here, already living their lives in buildings that I'm planning to erase. Footsteps echoed from above. Security had arrived with the ladder. We're lowering it down now, Clara called. Hold steady. The ladder descended through the hatch, its feet finding purchase on the elevator floor. Ethan grabbed the rungs and climbed, muscles burning with effort. At the top, Clara and 2 security guards pulled him through onto the 15th floor. He collapsed on solid ground, chest heaving. Clara knelt beside him. You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. He checked his phone. 2:47 p.m. 13 minutes to pick up Mia. He might actually make it. I need to go. Wait. Clara touched his arm. Please. I need to understand what happened here. Why the elevator failed. It failed because it's old, Ethan said bluntly. Because no one's maintained it properly in years. Because cutting costs is more important than safety. That's going to change. Clara stood, her expression hardening into determination. Marcus, get me the full maintenance records for this building. Every inspection, every repair, every report for the last 10 years. I want names of contractors, inspectors, everyone involved. Ms. Vance, the board meeting, canceled. This is more important. She turned back to Ethan. I want you to show me everything, every problem, every shortcut, every safety issue. Can you do that? Ethan hesitated. He should just walk away, get Mia, forget this ever happened, but something in Clara's face made him pause. A genuine desire to understand, to make things right. Not today, he said finally. Today I'm taking my daughter to the Science Museum, but tomorrow. Yeah, I'll show you tomorrow. Clara nodded. Tomorrow then. 9 a.m.? Make it 10. Mia's school doesn't start till 8:30. 10 o'clock. Clara pulled out a business card, scribbled something on the back. My personal cell. Call if you need anything before then. Ethan took the card, studying it. Clara Vance, CEO. The woman who was destroying his home was giving him her personal number. Nothing about this day made sense. I need to go, he said again. Of course. And Mr. Cole? Clara's expression softened. Happy birthday to your daughter. Ethan left her standing in the hallway, surrounded by assistants and security guards, looking somehow smaller than she had in the elevator. More human. He made it to Mia's school with 4 minutes to spare. She came running out, backpack bouncing, face bright with excitement. Dad, you made it! Told you I would. He swept her up in a hug, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. Ready for the Science Museum? So ready. As they walked to the bus stop, Mia chattering about her day, Ethan's mind kept returning to the elevator. To Clara Vance's face when she'd realized they might fall. To the way she'd apologized. To the look in her eyes when she'd said, that's gonna change. Maybe she'd meant it. Maybe she was just another rich person making empty promises. Tomorrow, He'd find out which. But tonight, he had a birthday to celebrate. Everything else could wait. The Science Museum was Mia's favorite place in the world, and watching her face light up at the dinosaur exhibit made Ethan forget, at least for a few hours, that they'd be homeless in 3 months. She pressed her nose against the glass case containing a velociraptor skeleton, her breath fogging the surface. Dad, did you know they were actually covered in feathers? Not scales like in the movies. I did not know that, Ethan said, though she'd told him this fact at least a dozen times before. He never got tired of her enthusiasm, the way her mind absorbed information like a sponge. And they were probably really smart, like crow smart, maybe smarter. She moved to the next exhibit, already talking about pterodactyls, and Ethan followed, his body still aching from the elevator incident, but his heart lighter than it had been in days. They spent 2 hours wandering through exhibits, Mia asking 1,000 questions that Ethan answered as best he could. When they finally left, the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and gold. Mia held his hand as they walked to the bus stop, swinging their arms between them. "Best birthday ever," she declared. Ethan squeezed her hand. "Even without the French toast?" "Even without the French toast." She paused, then added more quietly, "Dad, are we really going to have to move?" His chest tightened. He'd hoped she hadn't understood the notice, that maybe she was too young to grasp what it meant, but Mia had never been good at not understanding things. "Yeah, baby, we are." "Where will we go?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out together, okay?" "I promise." Another promise. He seemed to be making a lot of those lately. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan sat at their tiny kitchen table with his laptop open, searching for apartments he could afford. The options were grim. Everything in their price range was either too far from Mia's school, in unsafe neighborhoods, or barely larger than a closet. Some listings didn't even have photos, which was never a good sign. He was 3 pages deep into his search when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Cole? It's Clara Vance." Ethan sat up straighter, suddenly alert. He'd expected her to forget about their conversation, to go back to her billionaire life and never think about the maintenance worker from the elevator again. "Ms. Vance, I didn't expect to hear from you tonight." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "I kept thinking about what you said, about the people in your building. So I've been reading." "Reading what?" "Everything. Tenant files, lease agreements, complaint logs, maintenance reports. Do you know there have been over 200 documented issues in the Meridian in the past year alone? Heating failures, water leaks, electrical problems. 200, and almost none of them properly addressed." Ethan closed his laptop. "That sounds about right." "It's unacceptable." Clara's voice was tight with anger. "The previous owners were negligent, criminally negligent, and I'm about to demolish the evidence." "So what are you going to do about it?" Silence stretched between them. Then Clara said, "I don't know yet, but tomorrow, when you show me everything, I'll start figuring it out. 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock, Ethan confirmed. "And Mr. Cole? Thank you for saving us today. I never properly thanked you." "You did fine," Ethan said. "You helped. Most people in your position would have just waited to be rescued." "Most people in my position probably wouldn't have been in that elevator in the first place." Clara laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "I'll see you tomorrow." She hung up, and Ethan stared at his phone, trying to understand what had just happened. Clara Vance had called him at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday to talk about building maintenance. The woman had literally been in a board meeting when she got trapped. She should be focused on her company, her projects, her billions of dollars. Instead, she was reading tenant files and losing sleep over building code violations. Maybe she really did mean it when she said things would change. Or maybe, a cynical voice whispered in the back of his mind, she was just covering her liability before the lawsuit started. Ethan went to bed uncertain which possibility scared him more. The next morning, he dropped Mia at school and returned to the Meridian to find Clara Vance waiting in the lobby. She looked different than she had yesterday, still dressed expensively, but her hair was down, softening her features, and she wasn't surrounded by assistants, just her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I didn't know how you take it," she said, offering him one. "So I got black and brought cream and sugar." Black's fine. Ethan took the cup, surprised by the gesture. Ready for the grand tour? Ready. He led her to the basement first, to the maintenance room where yesterday's crisis had started. In daylight, the space looked even worse. Water stains on the ceiling, exposed wiring held together with electrical tape, equipment that should have been replaced decades ago. Clara stood in the center of the room, slowly turning in a circle. This is where you work every day? Yeah. It's a death trap. It's a job, Ethan said, and somebody has to do it. He showed her the HVAC system he'd been fixing when Patterson called him about the elevator. Clara listened intently as he explained how the ductwork was corroded, how the control systems were obsolete, how every winter they lost heat to multiple floors, and every summer the air conditioning barely functioned. This isn't just neglect, Clara said, running her finger along a rusted pipe. This is deliberate cost-cutting at the expense of human safety. Welcome to affordable housing, Ethan said dryly. They moved through the building systematically. Ethan showed her the water heater that periodically flooded the basement, the electrical panel where circuit breakers sparked when you flipped them, the roof access where leaks had created black mold colonies that maintenance wasn't equipped or trained to properly remove. In Mrs. Chen's apartment on the 8th floor, he showed Clara the window that wouldn't close all the way, letting in freezing winter air, the toilet that ran constantly because the parts to fix it weren't in the maintenance budget, the outlets that didn't work, forcing the elderly woman to run extension cords across her living room. Mrs. Chen herself was at her daughter's place, but Ethan had a master key for emergencies. Standing in her small, worn apartment, Clara was quiet for a long time. She's lived here 30 years? Clara finally asked. 32. Her husband died here. She says she can still feel him in the walls. Ethan gestured around the cramped space. This is what you're demolishing, not just buildings, memories, lives. Clara nodded slowly, her expression troubled. Show me more. They visited the Santos apartment next, where the young couple with newborn twins had complained about the heating. The apartment was freezing despite the thermostat reading 72 degrees. Ethan showed Clara the vent, completely blocked by construction debris from a repair job that had never been properly finished. Someone could have filed a complaint, Clara said. Someone did. Multiple people did. Ethan pulled out his phone, opened his email, and showed her the forwarded complaints he'd received over the past 6 months. I fixed what I could with what I had. But I'm one person, and there's only so much I can do with duct tape and prayers. They rode the elevator, a different one than yesterday's nightmare, to the 15th floor. Clara was visibly tense the entire ride, her hand gripping the railing. I may never use an elevator again, she muttered when the doors opened. Welcome to my world. On the 15th floor, Ethan showed her the Patterson apartment, though Patterson wasn't home, where water damage from a roof leak had destroyed an entire bedroom ceiling. The repair had been scheduled for 8 months. In the hallway, they passed Mr. Martinez, who was heading out with his grocery cart. He nodded to Ethan, but froze when he saw Clara, recognition flashing across his weathered face. You're her, he said flatly. The one buying the building. Clara straightened her shoulders. Yes, I'm Clara Vance. 30 years, Mr. Martinez said, his voice shaking with emotion. I've lived here 30 years, raised my kids here, buried my wife from here, and now you're going to knock it down and put up some fancy building I couldn't afford if I worked 3 jobs. Mr. Martinez, you know what the relocation package you're offering me is? $12,000. You know how far that goes in this city? Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. He turned to Ethan. And you're helping her? Showing her around? I'm showing her the truth, Ethan said quietly. Mr. Martinez shook his head in disgust and walked away, his cart rattling down the hallway. Clara watched him go, her face pale. He's right, she said softly. $12,000 is insulting. It's not just insulting, it's functionally useless. Ethan led her to the stairwell. He wasn't getting back in an elevator if he could help it, and they climbed to the roof. The city sprawled around them, glittering in the morning sun. From up here, you couldn't see the poverty, the struggle, the people being pushed out by progress. I used to come up here with my wife, Ethan said, standing at the edge. Before she left, we'd watch the sunset and talk about the future, about what we wanted for Mia. We had this whole plan: save up, buy a house in the suburbs, give her a yard to play in, normal stuff. What happened? Life happened. Or maybe we happened. Rachel couldn't handle the stress, the bills, the small apartment, the crying baby. She needed more than I could give her. Ethan laughed bitterly. Turns out a maintenance engineer's salary doesn't buy happiness. Clara moved to stand beside him. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made her choice. I made mine. I chose Mia. He looked at Clara. But now I'm going to lose even this shitty building with its broken elevators and leaking roof and freezing apartments, because at least it was ours. At least it was home. Mr. Cole, Ethan, just Ethan. Ethan. Clara turned to face him fully. What if I told you there might be another way? Another way to what? To do this project, to build Horizon 2.0 without displacing everyone. She pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. I've been running numbers all night. What if instead of demolition, we renovated, brought the Meridian and the other buildings up to code, added smart systems gradually, created mixed-income housing? Ethan stared at her. That would cost more. Significantly more. And take longer. Years longer. Clara met his eyes. But it would be right. It would be what my mother would have wanted me to do. Your board would never approve it. Probably not. Clara smiled grimly. But I'm the CEO, and sometimes that means making decisions that aren't popular. They stood on the roof for a while longer, not speaking, just looking out at the city. Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that this billionaire CEO actually cared about people like him. But trust was expensive, and he'd been burned before. Why are you really doing this? He asked finally. Yesterday you were ready to demolish the building. Today you're talking about renovation. People don't change that fast. Clara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Yesterday in that elevator, I thought I was going to die. And the only thing I could think about was how empty my life is. No husband, no children, no real friends, just work, just endless work. I've spent 15 years building an empire, and for what? To be remembered as the woman who displaced thousands of families so she could build smart buildings? Most CEOs don't care about that. I'm not most CEOs. Clara turned to him. My mother died when I was 23. Cancer. She spent her last weeks in a hospital room that cost more per day than she made in a month. I promised her I'd be different, that I'd use whatever success I had to help people like us. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that promise. I became exactly what I hated, someone so focused on growth and profit that I couldn't see the people I was hurting. Ethan studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, of corporate doublespeak. But all he saw was genuine regret. So what happens now? He asked. Now I go into my office and start a very difficult conversation with my board of directors. And you go back to work and keep this building running for as long as possible. Deal? Deal. They shook hands, and Ethan felt the calluses on her palm, surprising on someone who spent her days in boardrooms. Maybe she wasn't as different from him as he'd thought. Clara left, and Ethan returned to the basement, to Patterson and broken heating systems and the endless cycle of maintenance. But something had shifted. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. The feeling lasted approximately 4 hours. At 2:30, Patterson called him to the lobby. Corporate's here. They want to talk to you. Ethan climbed the stairs, still not trusting elevators, to find 3 people in expensive suits waiting. Not Clara. These were different corporate types, the kind with dead eyes and briefcases full of legal documents. Ethan Cole? The lead suit, a middle-aged man with silver hair, extended his hand. James Brennan, VP of Operations for Vance Industries. We need to have a conversation. Ethan's stomach sank. About what? About your future with the company. Can we speak somewhere private? They ended up in the building's small management office. Brennan sat behind the desk like he owned it, which, technically, he did now, while his 2 associates flanked him like sentinels. Mr. Cole, we understand you spent considerable time with Ms. Vance yesterday and today, Brennan began, showing her around the facility. She asked me to. Yes, well, Ms. Vance is passionate about certain things. Sometimes that passion clouds her judgment. Brennan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We want to make sure you understand the situation clearly. I understand it fine. Do you? Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you may have given Ms. Vance some incorrect impressions about this building and the Horizon 2.0 project. Ethan felt anger flare in his chest. I showed her the truth. Your truth, perhaps. But truth is subjective, isn't it? Brennan leaned forward. Here's an objective truth for you. Horizon 2.0 is a $3 billion project that will revitalize this entire district. It will create jobs, reduce carbon emissions, and provide state-of-the-art housing for thousands of people. It's been approved by the City Council, backed by investors, and scheduled to break ground in 3 months. And it will displace hundreds of families in the process. Families who will be compensated fairly and given assistance finding new housing. Brennan's smile hardened. Unless someone convinces Ms. Vance to throw away 3 years of planning and billions of dollars based on emotional appeals and worst-case scenarios. So you're here to what? Tell me to shut up? We're here to offer you an opportunity. Brennan nodded to one of his associates, who slid a folder across the desk. A promotion. Senior Facilities Manager for Horizon 2.0. Triple your current salary, full benefits, pension plan. You'd be overseeing maintenance for the entire complex once it's built. Ethan opened the folder. The salary number made his eyes widen. With that kind of money, he could afford a real apartment, could put Mia in a better school, could finally breathe. All you have to do, Brennan continued, is be realistic with Ms. Vance. Help her understand that renovation isn't feasible, that the smart move, the only move, is to proceed as planned. You want me to lie to her. We want you to provide context, to be a voice of reason. Brennan leaned back. Ms. Vance is brilliant, but she's also idealistic. Sometimes she needs people around her who can see the bigger picture. Ethan stared at the folder, at the number that represented security, stability, everything he'd been struggling for since Rachel left. 3 times his current salary. Enough to actually take care of his daughter the way she deserved. All he had to do was betray the only person who'd shown genuine concern for the people living in this building. No, he said, closing the folder. Brennan's smile vanished. Excuse me? I said no, I'm not going to lie to her, and I'm not going to help you manipulate her into ignoring what's right. Mr. Cole, I don't think you understand what you're turning down. I understand perfectly. Ethan stood. I've been poor my whole life. A little longer won't kill me. He walked out, leaving the folder on the desk and 3 stunned executives behind him. His hands were shaking, his heart pounding. He'd just turned down enough money to change his and Mia's lives forever. But he'd kept his integrity. That had to count for something. His phone rang before he reached the basement. Clara. Ethan, I just got out of the board meeting. They're furious. Brennan's calling for my removal as CEO if I pursue renovation over demolition. I know. He was just here offering me a bribe to talk you out of it. Silence. Then, did you take it? What do you think? I think, Clara laughed, and it sounded almost giddy. I think I may have finally found someone in this company with a spine. Listen, can you come to my office? I want to show you something. Ms. Vance, I'm covered in grease and I smell like the basement. I don't care. Please. This is important. 30 minutes later, Ethan was standing in Clara Vance's corner office on the 42nd floor of the Vance Industries building, feeling completely out of place among the modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows. Clara was at her desk, surrounded by tablets and laptops and printed spreadsheets. Look at this, she said, gesturing him over. I've been running scenarios all day. If we renovate instead of demolish, keep rent at current rates for existing tenants, while gradually adding smart systems and new construction, it's possible. Expensive, but possible. Ethan studied the numbers. They were staggering. This would cost almost as much as building from scratch. More, actually, but it's the right thing to do. Clara looked up at him. I'm going to fight for this, even if it means fighting my own board. They'll remove you. Maybe. Probably. She smiled. But I'd rather be removed for doing the right thing than stay CEO by doing the wrong one. My mother didn't raise me to be a coward. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, some wall he'd built around himself beginning to crack. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need your help. If I'm going to convince anyone this is viable, I need data, real data, not sanitized reports. I need someone who knows these buildings inside and out, someone who understands what the tenants actually need, someone who'll tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable." "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to save your home," Clara said, "and everyone else's." Ethan looked out the window at the city spread below. Somewhere down there was the Meridian, was Mia's school, was the life he'd built from nothing. And standing next to him was a woman who could destroy all of it with a signature, or maybe, just maybe, save it. "Okay," he said finally. "I'm in." Clara's smile was genuine, transforming her face. "Thank you. We're going to need to work fast. The board meets again next week, and they're going to push for my removal. We need to have a complete proposal ready by then. Renovation plans, cost analysis, community impact studies, everything." "That's impossible." "So was getting out of that elevator." Clara started gathering papers. "But we did it anyway." They worked through the evening, Clara on financial projections and Ethan on practical renovation assessments. Around 7, Clara ordered food, actual good food, not the cheap takeout Ethan was used to, and they ate at her conference table while comparing notes. "The electrical systems need complete replacement," Ethan said, pointing to his tablet. "You can't just add smart sensors to wiring from the 70s. It's a fire hazard. How long would a full electrical upgrade take?" "Per building? 6 months minimum, and that's if you do it floor by floor so people can stay in their apartments." Clara made notes. "Add it to the timeline. What else?" They went through every system: plumbing, HVAC, structural reinforcement, roof replacement, window upgrades. Each addition made the project more expensive and more complex. By 9 p.m., they had a proposal that would take 5 years and cost $4 billion. "The board will never approve this," Clara said, staring at the final number. "Then we make them approve it." Ethan surprised himself with his boldness. "We get the tenants involved, media coverage, show everyone what's at stake." Clara looked at him with something like admiration. "You're suggesting we wage a PR war against my own company." "I'm suggesting we tell the truth loud enough that people listen. That's risky, for both of us." "Life's risky," Ethan said. "Yesterday proved that." Clara laughed, and Ethan realized it was the first time he'd heard her really laugh. Not the polite corporate chuckle, but genuine amusement. "You're right. Okay, let's do it. But first, you need to go home. Your daughter probably thinks you've abandoned her." Ethan checked his phone and swore. Rosa had been watching Mia for hours, sending increasingly concerned texts. "I'm sorry, I lost track of time." "Go," Clara said. "We'll continue tomorrow. And Ethan, thank you for believing this is worth fighting for." He left her office with his mind spinning, barely remembering the elevator ride down. Though when the car jolted slightly, his heart raced and his palms went sweaty. The trauma of yesterday wasn't going away anytime soon. Mia was asleep on Rosa's couch when he arrived, and Rosa gave him a look that was half worried, half curious. "Working late with the CEO?" she asked quietly, following him to the door as he carried Mia. "That's not something I expected to hear." "It's complicated," Ethan said. "Everything with you is complicated." Rosa smiled. "But whatever you're doing, I hope it works. This building needs someone fighting for it." At home, Ethan tucked Mia into bed and collapsed on his own mattress, exhausted but unable to sleep. His mind kept replaying the day, Claire's determination, Brennan's bribe, the impossible task they'd taken on. He thought about his ex-wife, about how she'd left because she couldn't handle the struggle. And he thought about Clara, who could have anyone, do anything, but was choosing to fight a battle that would probably cost her everything. Maybe, he thought, as sleep finally claimed him, this was what courage looked like. His phone buzzed one last time. A text from Clara. "Thank you for today, for reminding me why I do this." See, Ethan smiled in the darkness and, for the first time in a long time, slept soundly. The next morning started with a phone call Ethan didn't expect. He was making actual French toast, determined to get it right this time, when his phone lit up with Clara's name. "Turn on channel 7, she said without preamble. "Now!" Ethan grabbed the remote, clicking through channels until he found the local news. His stomach dropped. A reporter stood in front of the Meridian Towers, microphone in hand, speaking to the camera with practiced concern. Behind her, residents were being interviewed. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Martinez, the Santos family with their twins. What they're calling a humanitarian crisis in the making, the reporter was saying. Hundreds of families facing displacement as tech giant Vance Industries moves forward with its controversial Horizon 2.0 project. But perhaps most alarming are the revelations about building safety. Documents obtained by this station show years of neglected maintenance, including the elevator malfunction that trapped CEO Clara Vance herself just 2 days ago. The screen cut to footage of the Meridian's lobby, then to what looked like internal maintenance reports. Ethan's reports, the ones he'd shown Clara. How did they get those? Ethan asked, though Clara was still on the line. I leaked them, Clara said calmly. Last night, after you left. Sent everything to 3 news stations and 2 newspapers. If we're going to fight this, we need public pressure. You leaked documents from your own company. Technically, they're documents about properties my company now owns, detailing safety violations the previous owners ignored. I'm not exposing Vance Industries. I'm exposing a system that allows this kind of neglect. Clara paused. My board is going to be furious. Brennan's probably having a stroke right now, but it's done. On screen, Mr. Martinez was speaking, his voice shaking with emotion. 30 years I've been here, and now they tell me I got 90 days to find somewhere else. Where am I supposed to go? Everything I can afford is miles from here, from my doctors, from my community. The reporter's face was appropriately sympathetic. And Mr. Martinez is not alone. Our investigation found that the average relocation package being offered would cover less than 2 months' rent in comparable neighborhoods. We reached out to Vance Industries for comment, but have not yet received a response. They will soon, Clara said. I'm holding a press conference at noon. I want you there. Me? Why? Because you're the human face of this story, Ethan. You're the single dad, the maintenance worker who's been trying to keep these buildings safe while everyone above you cut corners. People need to see you. Ethan looked at Mia, who was watching the television with wide eyes. Dad, that's our building. I know, sweetheart. Are we famous? Despite everything, Ethan smiled. Something like that. He told Clara he'd be there, hung up, and finished making breakfast in a daze. The French toast came out perfectly this time, golden and crispy, just how Mia liked it. She ate 3 pieces, chattering about how cool it was that their building was on TV, completely unaware of what it all meant. Rosa called while Ethan was doing dishes. You saw the news? Yeah. Is it true? About the elevator? You were trapped with her? For about 2 hours. Dios mío, Ethan, you could have died. Rosa's voice was tight with worry. And you didn't tell me? I didn't want to scare Mia. Or you. Too late for that. She sighed. What's happening? Really happening? Ethan dried his hands, watching Mia play with her dolls in the living room. I think Clara Vance is trying to do the right thing, and I think a lot of powerful people are going to try to stop her. And you're helping her? Yeah, I am. Then be careful, Rosa said softly. Rich people's fights have a way of crushing regular people in the crossfire. She wasn't wrong. But Ethan was already in the crossfire. They all were. At 11:30, he dropped Mia with Rosa, who insisted on keeping her for the day, just in case things get complicated, and took the bus to Vance Industries headquarters. Security was expecting him, which was surreal. They gave him a visitor badge and escorted him to the top floor, where Clara's office had been transformed into a war room. There were at least a dozen people working, assistants, lawyers, PR specialists, all moving with frantic purpose. Clara stood at the center of it all, dressed in a dark blue suit that somehow made her look both powerful and approachable. When she saw Ethan, her face relaxed slightly. You came. You asked me to. I did, but I wasn't sure you would. She pulled him aside, away from the chaos. This is going to get ugly, Ethan. The board has already called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. They're going to try to remove me. Can they do that? I'm CEO, but I don't have majority control. If enough board members vote against me, I'm out. Clara's jaw tightened. Which is exactly what Brennan's been working on since yesterday. He's been calling board members, telling them I've had some kind of breakdown, that I'm making emotional decisions that will destroy the company. Have you? Clara looked at him sharply, then smiled. Maybe. But if caring about people is a breakdown, then I'm okay with that diagnosis. A woman in her 30s approached, tablet in hand. Ms. Vance, media is set up in the main conference room. We're live in 20 minutes. Thank you, Diane. Clara turned back to Ethan. I want you on stage with me. You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but I need people to see you, to understand this isn't just abstract policy. It's about real people. Ethan's throat went dry. I've never been on camera before. Neither had I, the first time. You just tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask. They walked to the conference room together, and Ethan's anxiety ratcheted up with every step. The room was packed. Reporters from every major outlet, cameras on tripods, microphones clustered on the podium like metal flowers. Clara squeezed his hand once, then let go and walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Ethan stood to the side, trying to be invisible, which was impossible given that every camera in the room swung toward him the moment he appeared. Thank you all for coming, Clara began, her voice steady and clear. 2 days ago, I was trapped in an elevator at the Meridian Towers for nearly 2 hours. The elevator failed because of decades of neglected maintenance, safety violations that were documented but ignored, and a system that prioritized profit over people. The reporters were already typing, cameras flashing. Clara continued, her voice gaining strength. I'm here today to announce that Vance Industries is fundamentally changing our approach to the Horizon 2.0 project. Instead of demolishing the Meridian and surrounding buildings, we will be implementing a comprehensive renovation program that will preserve affordable housing while upgrading safety and infrastructure. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone called out, "What about the timeline, the budget?" Both will increase significantly, Clara acknowledged. This project will now take approximately 5 years and cost an estimated $4 billion, up from our initial $3 billion. But this is an investment in community, in sustainability, in doing what's right rather than what's easy. Ms. Vance, a reporter in the front row stood. Sources say your board of directors opposes this change. Some are calling for your removal as CEO. How do you respond? Clara's smile was sharp. I respond by saying that leadership means making difficult decisions. If the board decides that protecting profits is more important than protecting people, then perhaps I'm not the right CEO for Vance Industries. But I believe there's a better way forward, and I'm committed to fighting for it. Another reporter. The man with you, is that Ethan Cole, the maintenance worker who was trapped with you? All eyes turned to Ethan. Clara gestured for him to join her at the podium. His legs felt like concrete, but he moved forward, hyper-aware of every camera pointed at him. This is Ethan Cole, Clara said. He's a single father, a maintenance engineer who spent years trying to keep the Meridian safe with inadequate resources and budget. He's also the person who saved my life when that elevator failed. Ethan, would you like to say anything? He absolutely did not want to say anything, but he looked out at the reporters, thought about Mia and Mrs. Chen and Mr. Martinez and everyone else who couldn't afford to be here, who didn't have a voice in rooms like this. I'm not good at speeches, he started, his voice rough. I fix things for a living. Broken heaters, leaking pipes, faulty wiring, and for years I've been trying to fix problems that should never have existed in the first place. Problems caused by landlords who saw my neighbors as income sources instead of human beings. He could feel Clara beside him, supporting him without touching him. My daughter is 8 years old. She's lived in the Meridian her whole life. It's not perfect. The heat doesn't always work. The elevator's dangerous. The roof leaks. But it's home. And Ms. Vance is the first person with actual power who's listened to people like me, who's seen us as people worth protecting. Ethan looked directly at the cameras. So yeah, renovating is harder and more expensive than demolishing. But my daughter's home is worth it. Everyone's home is worth it. The room erupted with questions, but Clara raised her hand. That's all for now. We'll release detailed plans as they develop. Thank you. She guided Ethan off the stage, her hand on his elbow, and they escaped into a side corridor. The moment the door closed, Ethan sagged against the wall. I can't believe I just did that. You were perfect, Clara said, and she sounded genuinely moved. Exactly what people needed to hear. I was terrified. So was I, the first 100 times. She checked her phone and winced. Brennan's calling, along with 6 board members, the head of legal, and my mother's ghost, apparently. Despite the tension, Ethan laughed. You should probably answer some of those. Probably. But she didn't move. Ethan, I want you to know, whatever happens this afternoon, whatever the board decides, I don't regret this. Any of it. Even if they fire you? Even then. Clara smiled. Turns out there are things more important than being CEO. Before Ethan could respond, Diane appeared. Ms. Vance, the board is convening in 30 minutes. They've requested your presence. Clara's smile faded. Of course they have, she turned to Ethan. You should go home. Be with your daughter. This next part is going to be ugly. Let me come with you. Ethan, you stood up there and defended people like me. The least I can do is stand with you. He straightened up. Besides, I want to see Brennan's face when you walk in there. Clara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but stay quiet and let me handle the board. These people are sharks. I work in maintenance. I'm used to dealing with things that can kill me. They rode the elevator to the boardroom floor, Clara's hand gripping the railing the entire time, her fear of elevators now a permanent fixture. The boardroom itself was intimidating, all dark wood and leather chairs and windows overlooking the city. 12 board members were already seated, and every face turned when Clara entered with Ethan behind her. James Brennan sat at the far end, his expression triumphant. Clara, and you've brought your maintenance worker. How quaint. Mr. Cole is here as my guest and advisor on the Horizon project, Clara said coldly, taking her seat at the head of the table. Ethan stood behind her, trying to look professional and failing. The chairman, an elderly man named Richard Ashford, cleared his throat. Clara, we've called this meeting to discuss your unauthorized press conference and the dramatic changes you've announced to Horizon 2.0. Changes that, I might add, were not approved by this board. I'm CEO, Clara said. Making strategic decisions is my job. Strategic decisions, yes. Reckless decisions that quadruple our timeline and increase costs by billions? No. But Brennan leaned forward. You've also leaked confidential documents to the media, exposing the company to potential liability. I leaked documents about safety violations at properties we now own, documents that show systemic neglect by previous ownership. That's not exposing Vance Industries, that's protecting it from future liability. That's a matter of interpretation, another board member, a woman named Patricia Chen, interjected. What's not interpretation is that you've committed us to a project that will drain resources for years. Resources we have, Clara shot back. Vance Industries generated $8 billion in profit last year. We can afford to invest in doing the right thing. The right thing? Brennan's voice dripped with contempt. The right thing is maximizing shareholder value. The right thing is delivering the project we promised investors. The right thing is not throwing away years of planning because you had an emotional experience in a broken elevator. Ethan felt his fists clench. He wanted to defend Clara, to tell Brennan exactly where he could shove his shareholder value. But Clara had asked him to stay quiet. I'm not asking for approval, Clara said, her voice ice. I'm informing you of the direction we're taking. As CEO, that's my prerogative. Not anymore. Brennan slid a document across the table. I've been in contact with 7 board members. We have the votes to remove you as CEO, effective immediately, if you don't rescind this renovation plan and proceed with Horizon as originally designed. The room went silent. Clara picked up the document, read it slowly, then set it down. You're staging a coup, she said flatly. We're protecting the company, Brennan corrected, from a CEO who's clearly compromised. Clara, no one questions your brilliance or your past contributions, but this decision shows a fundamental lack of judgment. We're offering you a graceful exit. Resign voluntarily, transition to a board advisory role, and we'll all move forward. And if I refuse? Then we vote. Right now. And you lose. Ethan watched Clara's face, saw the emotions warring there. Anger, fear, defiance. She'd known this was coming, but knowing and experiencing were different things. This was her company, built from nothing, and they were taking it from her. Clara stood slowly, her hands flat on the table. I built Vance Industries from a single software startup. I made every person in this room wealthy beyond their dreams, and you're removing me because I want to help people instead of displace them? We're removing you because you've lost perspective, Patricia said, not unkindly. Clara, take some time. Rest. Come back when you're thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Clara looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. Fine. Take your vote. Remove me. But know this, you're not just removing a CEO. You're removing the moral center of this company, and history will remember that. We'll take that risk, Brennan said. All in favor of Clara Vance's removal as CEO? 7 hands went up, just enough for a majority. Ethan felt his stomach drop. It was over. They'd lost. But Clara wasn't done. Before you finalize this, she said, pulling out her phone, there's something you should know. This morning, I transferred 40% of my personal shares in Vance Industries to a newly created charitable trust, the Vance Community Fund, dedicated to affordable housing development and maintenance worker advocacy. Brennan's face went white. You can't do that. I already did. The paperwork was filed at 9 a.m., which means I no longer have voting control of my shares. The trust does. And the Trust's board of directors has a very different perspective on what Vance Industries should be doing. You're destroying your own company, Patricia said, shocked. No, I'm saving it from people who forgot why we started it in the first place. Clara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You want me gone? Fine. I'm gone. But you're going to have to negotiate with the Trust now, and they're going to insist on renovation over demolition. They're going to insist on community input. They're going to insist on everything I just proposed because I've legally bound them to do so. The room erupted in chaos, board members shouting, Brennan on his phone, Patricia demanding legal review. Ethan stood in the middle of it, stunned by what Clara had just done. She'd given up billions of dollars, given up control of her own company, all to protect people she'd never met, in buildings she'd visited for the first time 2 days ago. Clara turned to him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Come on, let's get out of here. They left the boardroom together, walking past shouting executives and frantic assistants. In the elevator, Clara gripping the railing again, her knuckles white, neither of them spoke. They rode down 42 floors in silence, and when the doors opened to the lobby, Clara walked straight out of the building like she couldn't bear to be there another second. Ethan followed her out to the plaza, where she finally stopped, looking up at the Vance Industries logo gleaming on the building's facade. I just quit my own company, she said wonderingly, or got fired. I'm not sure which. You did the right thing, Ethan said. Did I? I just threw away everything I built, my career, my reputation, billions of dollars. For what? A maybe? A hope that things might change? For people, Ethan said firmly. You did it for people. That's worth more than money. Clara laughed, and it sounded slightly hysterical. Easy to say when you're not the one who just gave up $8 billion. I've been poor my whole life, so yeah, it is easier for me to say. But that doesn't make it less true. Ethan moved to stand in front of her, making her look at him. You know what my ex-wife told me when she left? She said I'd never amount to anything because I cared more about doing right than getting ahead. And you know what? She was right. I'm a maintenance worker with a daughter I can barely support. But I sleep at night. Can Brennan say that? Clara wiped her eyes. You really are a terrible maintenance worker. You know that. Actual maintenance workers are supposed to be cynical and jaded. I'm working on it. She smiled, really smiled, and it transformed her face completely. Buy me coffee? I suddenly have a lot of free time and no idea what to do with it. They found a small cafe 2 blocks away. The kind of place where Clara definitely didn't fit with her expensive suit, and Ethan didn't fit with his work uniform. But the coffee was good, and for an hour they just sat and talked about nothing important. Favorite movies, worst jobs, childhood dreams, normal things that normal people talked about. I wanted to be an astronaut, Clara admitted. When I was 8, thought I'd live on Mars. I wanted to be a firefighter, Ethan said. Seemed heroic. What happened? Turns out firefighting requires running into burning buildings, and I'm not that brave. He grinned. Also, the pay's not great, and I had a baby on the way. Do you regret it? Not following your dream. Ethan thought about Mia, about reading her bedtime stories and teaching her to ride a bike and watching her face light up at the science museum. Not even a little bit. Mia's my dream. Everything else is just details. Clara looked at him with something like envy. Must be nice being that certain about something. You gave up your company today. Sounds pretty certain to me. That was desperation, not certainty. I don't know if it'll work. Don't know if the trust will actually be able to force changes, or if Brennan will find some legal loophole to bypass everything. She stared into her coffee. I might have just destroyed everything for nothing. Or you might have saved hundreds of families. Won't know until we try. We? Clara raised an eyebrow. You think I'm backing out now? After that speech you gave? Ethan shook his head. You're stuck with me, Vance. Clara, if we're going to be partners in whatever this is, you should probably use my first name. Clara. Ethan tested it out. It felt strange, too familiar, but also right. Partners, huh? Well, I'm unemployed, and you're probably about to be fired for helping me. Might as well team up. They sat there until the cafe started filling with the dinner crowd, and then Clara walked Ethan to the bus stop. It was strange, he thought, how comfortable this had become. 2 days ago, she'd been the enemy, the billionaire destroying his life. Now she was, what? A friend? Something more than that? He wasn't sure. I should go get Mia, he said when his bus arrived. Tell her I said hi, and that I'm sorry about all this chaos. She thinks it's exciting. We're on TV. Apparently that makes us cool. Clara laughed. At 8, everything makes you cool. Wait until she's 14. The bus doors opened and Ethan climbed on, then turned back. Clara, thank you for fighting for us. Thank you for reminding me why it's worth fighting. The bus pulled away and Ethan watched through the window as Clara stood on the sidewalk, looking smaller and more vulnerable than any billionaire CEO should. His phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. Everything okay? He typed back, getting there. When he arrived at Rosa's apartment, Mia launched herself at him, full of questions about the press conference she'd watched on Rosa's TV. Ethan answered as best he could, simplifying the complicated mess of corporate politics and board votes into something an 8-year-old could understand. So Miss Clara is trying to save our home? Mia asked. Yeah, baby, she is. Is she a superhero? Ethan thought about Clara standing in that boardroom, giving up everything she'd built. Yeah, he said softly. I think maybe she is. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. Mr. Cole, this is Patricia Chen from the Vance Industries board. Ethan's guard went up immediately. What do you want? To apologize, and to inform you that after reviewing the documents Clara leaked, documents we should have seen months ago, the board has voted to pursue renovation over demolition for Horizon 2.0. Ethan sat up straight. What? Clara was right. About the safety issues, about the human cost, about all of it. She went about it the wrong way, leaking documents and making public statements without board approval. But she was right. Patricia paused. We'd like her back as CEO, but she's not answering our calls. Maybe because you fired her. We didn't fire her. We voted to remove her, but she walked out before the vote was finalized. Legally, she's still CEO, and we'd like her to stay. Another pause. Will you talk to her? Convince her to come back? Why would I do that? Because the alternative is Brennan as interim CEO, and he'll find a way to dismantle everything she tried to build. We need Clara. The company needs her. But more than that, the people in those buildings need her. Ethan wanted to refuse, to tell Patricia exactly what she could do with her apology and her sudden change of heart. But she was right. Without Clara, everything they'd fought for would disappear. I'll talk to her, he said finally. But I'm not making any promises. He called Clara immediately. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with sleep. Ethan, what's wrong? The board wants you back. Silence. Then, what? He told her about Patricia's call, about the vote to pursue renovation, about how they needed her back as CEO. Clara listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for so long he thought she'd hung up. Clara? I'm here, just Processing. She laughed softly. They want me back. Question is, do you want to go back? More silence, then, I don't know. This morning I was so sure. But now, I don't know if I can work with people who were willing to throw me out the moment things got difficult. So don't work with them. Work around them. Use your CEO position to force the changes you want. And if they don't like it, let them fire you for real this time. Ethan surprised himself with his boldness. You gave up billions of dollars today, Clara. Don't waste that sacrifice by walking away now. When did you become so wise? I've always been this wise. You just weren't listening. Clara laughed, and he could hear the tears in her voice. Okay, I'll go back, but only if you come with me. I want you officially on the Horizon team, full-time, real salary, actual authority to make decisions. I'm a maintenance worker. You're the person who knows these buildings better than anyone else. You're the person who understands what the tenants need, and you're the person I trust. Clara's voice strengthened. So yes or no, are you in? Ethan thought about Patterson and the basement and broken heaters, thought about actually having a voice in how things were done, instead of just cleaning up after other people's bad decisions. I'm in, he said. Good. Meet me at the office tomorrow, 9 a.m. We've got a company to save. She hung up, and Ethan sat in the darkness of his apartment, his phone still in his hand, trying to process everything that had happened. 3 days ago, he'd been a maintenance worker facing eviction. Now he was somehow part of a team trying to revolutionize affordable housing. Life, he thought, was incredibly weird sometimes, but also, for the first time in years, full of possibility. Walking into Vance Industries as an actual employee instead of a visitor felt surreal. Ethan stood in the lobby at 8:45, wearing the only dress shirt he owned, slightly wrinkled despite his best efforts with an iron, and feeling completely out of place among the suited executives streaming past him. Clara found him there, looking surprisingly relaxed in dark slacks and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail instead of the severe bun she'd worn before. You came early, she said, smiling. Didn't want to be late on my first day. Technically, you don't start until we finish the paperwork, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. She handed him a visitor badge. Until HR processes everything, you're officially my consultant. Come on, I want to show you something before the board meeting. They took the elevator, Clara's knuckles still white on the railing, to the 35th floor, which housed the Horizon 2.0 planning department. The space was open concept, with dozens of workstations arranged around a central area dominated by a massive 3D holographic display of the project. Except the display no longer showed sleek glass towers. Now it showed the Meridian and surrounding buildings, but transformed. Renovated facades, rooftop gardens, solar panels gleaming in simulated sunlight. It was beautiful and functional, and most importantly, it kept the building standing. We worked all night, Clara said, gesturing to a team of exhausted-looking architects and engineers clustered around coffee cups. I wanted something concrete to show the board, proof that renovation isn't just possible, it's better than our original plan. A young woman with purple-streaked hair approached, tablet in hand. Ms. Vance, we finished the structural analysis. The Meridian's foundation is solid, surprisingly. With reinforcement, it could last another 50 years easy. Good. What about the timeline? 4 years if we work on multiple buildings simultaneously. 5 if we go one at a time to minimize displacement. The architect pulled up schematics on her tablet. We'd need to relocate residents floor by floor during renovation, but we can use the completed sections as temporary housing. Nobody has to leave the neighborhood. Clara turned to Ethan. What do you think? He studied the hologram, looking past the pretty graphics to the practical reality. The HVAC routing looks tight in the older sections. You'll have clearance issues. The purple-haired architect blinked. How did you... We've been arguing about that for hours. I've been crawling through those ducts for 5 years. Trust me, if you run the new system that way, it won't fit. Ethan pointed to a section of the hologram. But if you rewrote through here and here, you can use the existing shaft and save 6 months of demolition work. The architects gathered around, asking questions, making notes. Ethan found himself deep in technical discussion, forgetting to be intimidated by their degrees and credentials. He knew these buildings in a way no blueprint could capture. knew where the pipes froze in winter, where water pooled after rain, which walls were load-bearing and which were just decorative. Clara watched him work, and when he finally looked up, she was smiling. "Still think you're just a maintenance worker?" "I fix things," Ethan said. "This is just fixing on a bigger scale." "Ms. Vance?" Diane appeared in the doorway. "The board's ready for you." Clara's smile faded. "Right, time to face the music." She turned to the architects. "Keep working. I want complete plans by end of week." The boardroom was less hostile than yesterday, but tension still hung in the air like smoke. The same 12 faces, but now they looked at Clara with something between respect and wariness. Brennan was absent, Ethan noticed. Patricia Chen sat where he'd been yesterday. "Clara," Richard Ashford said, "thank you for coming. And Mr. Cole, welcome." "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome," Clara said, taking her seat. Ethan stood behind her again, but this time it felt less like he was hiding and more like he belonged there. "Yesterday was regrettable," Patricia said carefully. "We reacted emotionally to what felt like a unilateral decision, but after reviewing everything, the maintenance records, the safety violations, the human impact, we understand why you felt immediate action was necessary." "Where's Brennan?" Clara asked. "Resigned," Richard said flatly. "Or rather, we encouraged his resignation. It became clear his priorities weren't aligned with the company's values." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Since when do we have values beyond profit?" "Since our CEO risked everything to prove we should." Patricia leaned forward. "Clara, we want you to stay, not just as a figurehead, but as an actual leader. We're prepared to back the renovation plan fully, with one condition." "Which is?" "Transparency. No more leaking documents or making public announcements without consulting us first. We need to be partners in this, not adversaries." Clara considered this, her fingers drumming on the table. "And if I disagree with a board decision?" "Then we discuss it like adults," Richard said. "We may not always agree, but we'll respect each other enough to communicate. Deal?" Ethan watched Clara weigh the offer. She could walk away, take her trust fund, and start something new without corporate oversight, or she could stay and fight from the inside, using her position to force real change. "Deal," Clara said finally. "But I have conditions too. First, Ethan Cole becomes Director of Community Integration for Horizon 2.0, reporting directly to me. Second, we establish a tenant advisory board with actual decision-making power, not just token representation. Third, we commit publicly to maintaining at least 60% of all renovated units as affordable housing in perpetuity." The board members exchanged glances. Patricia nodded slowly. "We can work with that, though director seems like a big leap for someone without a formal background." "He has something better than a formal background," Clara said. "He has lived experience and technical expertise. He knows these buildings and these communities in ways none of us do. If we're serious about doing this right, we need people like him making decisions." "I agree," said a board member Ethan didn't recognize, a black woman in her 60s. "I grew up in housing projects. Watching rich people make decisions about poor people's lives never ends well. We need voices from the community at every level." "All in favor of Clara's conditions?" Richard asked. Every hand went up. Not unanimously. A few members clearly had reservations, but enough to carry the vote. "Then it's settled," Richard said. "Welcome back, Clara. Officially this time." The meeting continued for another hour, diving into budgets and timelines and legal considerations. Ethan's head spun with the sheer scale of it all. They were talking about billions of dollars, thousands of lives, years of work. And somehow, impossibly, he was part of it. When they finally escaped the boardroom, Clara pulled him into an empty office and closed the door. "Director of Community Integration," she said. "That's a real title with real authority, but it's also a real target. Brennan won't be the last person who opposes what we're doing. Are you sure you want this? Are you kidding? I just got promoted from maintenance worker to director. I'm terrified, but I'm not stupid enough to say no." Clara laughed, and the tension drained from her shoulders. "Good, because I'm terrified too, and I'd rather be terrified with someone I trust." Over the next week, Ethan's life transformed completely. HR processed his paperwork. complete with a salary that made him check the numbers 3 times to make sure there wasn't a mistake. He could afford a real apartment now, could put Mia in better schools, could finally breathe without constantly calculating bills. But first, he had to help save the Meridian. The architects gave him an office, small, but with a window and a door and furniture that wasn't held together with duct tape. He spent his days meeting with tenants, documenting their concerns, translating their real-world problems into language the engineers could understand. Nights he worked with Clara and the design team, reviewing plans, making adjustments, fighting for details that corporate types wanted to cut as unnecessary. "We don't need community rooms," one efficiency consultant argued. "They're wasted space." "They're where people build community," Ethan shot back. "Where Mrs. Chen plays mahjong with her neighbors, where the Santos twins will have birthday parties, where Mr. Martinez teaches kids chess. That's not wasted space. That's the whole point." The consultant looked to Clara for support. She shook her head. "Ethan's right. The rooms stay." It became a pattern. Someone would suggest cutting a feature to save money, and Ethan would explain why that feature mattered to actual residents, and Clara would back him up. Slowly, grudgingly, the corporate types learned that this wasn't just a construction project. It was about people. Mia adjusted to their new life with the flexibility of children. She loved telling her classmates that her dad was a director now, even if she wasn't entirely sure what that meant. Rosa was happy for him, but worried too. "You're in their world now," she said one evening when he picked up Mia. "Rich people's world. Don't forget where you came from." "I couldn't forget if I tried," Ethan assured her. "I still live in apartment 7B, for now. But when you can afford better, then I'll move somewhere in the neighborhood, somewhere close to you and everyone else." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not leaving, Rosa. This isn't about climbing the ladder. It's about making the ladder accessible to everyone else." 2 weeks after the board meeting, Clara called an all-hands meeting for everyone involved in Horizon 2.0. The conference room was packed: architects, engineers, construction managers, community liaisons, and a dozen tenant representatives from the buildings affected. Mrs. Chen was there, looking tiny but fierce in her best dress. Mr. Martinez, arms crossed, skeptical but listening. The Santos parents with one of their twins, the other with a babysitter. And more. So many more. People whose homes were on the line. Clara stood at the front, and Ethan realized she was nervous. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled up the presentation. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Especially our tenants, who have every right to distrust this process. For too long, you've been talked at instead of talked with. That changes now." She clicked through slides showing the renovation plans in detail. Not just pretty renderings, but practical information. Timelines, temporary housing arrangements, rent protection guarantees, dispute resolution processes. "This is going to take 4 years," Clara said. 4 years of construction noise, temporary displacement, and inconvenience. We can't pretend otherwise. But what we can promise is that you won't be abandoned, you won't be priced out, and you'll have a voice in every decision that affects your home. Mrs. Chen raised her hand. "How do we know you'll keep those promises? The last 3 owners made promises too." "Because this time, you'll have legal protection," Ethan said, standing up. He'd helped draft the tenant agreements personally. "Every commitment Clara just made is in writing, legally binding. If Vance Industries breaks these promises, you can sue, and you'll win because the contracts are specifically designed to protect you." "Who pays for the lawyers if we need to sue?" Mr. Martinez asked. "The trust I established," Clara said. "Part of the Vance Community Fund is specifically designated for tenant legal support. You'll never have to fight alone." Questions came rapid fire about noise levels and construction hours, and what happens if someone gets sick and needs accommodation, about accessibility for disabled residents and protection for families with children, and guarantees that rent won't spike the moment renovations finish. Clara and Ethan answered them all, sometimes conferring with the architects and lawyers. When they didn't know an answer, they admitted it and promised to find out. No corporate doublespeak, no evasions. Slowly, the hostility in the room shifted, not to trust, that would take time, but to cautious hope. At the end, Mrs. Chen stood up, leaning on her walker. "I've lived through a lot of promises," she said, her voice thin but clear. "And I've seen most of them broken. But I'm going to choose to believe you, because the alternative is giving up, and I'm too old and too stubborn for that." The room applauded, and Clara's eyes shone with unshed tears. After the meeting, tenants lined up to talk with Ethan, to shake his hand, to tell him they were glad someone from the neighborhood was involved. He stayed for hours, listening to concerns, taking notes, promising to fight for them. When everyone finally left, he found Clara sitting alone in the conference room, staring at her tablet. "You okay?" he asked. "I keep thinking about what could go wrong," she admitted. "Construction delays, cost overruns, contractors cutting corners. There are 1,000 ways this could fail." "Yeah, but there are also 1,000 ways it could succeed." Ethan sat beside her. "You know what my dad used to say? Can't steer a parked car. You've got to be moving to change direction. So we start moving and adjust as we go." Clara smiled. "Your dad sounds wise." "He was a factory worker who drank too much and died at 53 from a heart attack. But he had his moments." Ethan's voice softened. "He'd have liked you, I think. Would have appreciated someone who risks everything to do right by people." "I didn't risk everything. I still have plenty of money left." "You risked your reputation, your company, your position. That's everything that matters to someone like you." Ethan met her eyes. "Don't diminish what you did, Clara. It was brave." She looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm not brave. I'm just trying to make up for lost time." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." They sat in comfortable silence for a while until Clara's phone buzzed with yet another email requiring her attention. She sighed, standing up. "I should get back to work. Budget review starts in an hour." "Want help?" "You're a director, not my assistant." "I'm also your friend. At least I hope I am." Clara's expression softened. "You are. And yes, I'd appreciate the help." They worked side by side through the evening, reviewing construction bids and contractor proposals. Ethan learned to spot red flags, companies promising unrealistic timelines, budgets that seemed too good to be true, vague language that left room for corner cutting. Around 8, Clara ordered dinner from a nearby restaurant, insisting they both needed to eat. They ate in her office, arguing good-naturedly about whether the community gardens should be on rooftops or ground level. "Rooftops get more sun," Clara argued. "Ground level is accessible to elderly residents and people with disabilities," Ethan countered. "Mrs. Chen can't climb 5 flights of stairs." "We'll have elevators." "Which you still don't trust." Clara threw a napkin at him. "That's not fair." "It's completely fair. You grip the railing like it's the only thing keeping you alive." "Because I was literally trapped in an elevator and almost died," Clara said, but she was smiling. "Some fears are rational." "True." "Okay, compromise. Gardens on both ground level and rooftops. Different plants for different sun exposure, and everyone gets access." "That'll cost more." "Everything we do costs more. But it's worth it." Clara nodded, making notes. "Worth it," she repeated softly, like she was reminding herself. Ethan's phone rang. Rosa, probably wondering where he was. "I should take this." He stepped into the hallway, answering. "Hey, Rosa, I'm sorry." "Ethan?" Her voice was tight with fear. "It's Mia. She fell at school during aftercare. They took her to the hospital." His world tilted. "What? Is she okay?" "I don't know. They said something about her arm. I'm heading there now." "Which hospital?" "Mercy General." "I'll meet you there." He ended the call and burst back into Clara's office. "I have to go. Mia's in the hospital." Clara was on her feet immediately. "What happened?" "She fell." "I don't know more than that." Ethan grabbed his jacket, his hands shaking. "I'm sorry, I have to—" "Don't apologize. Go." Clara grabbed her purse. "I'm driving you." "You don't have to." "I'm driving you," she repeated firmly. "You're in no state to navigate public transit." They took her car, a sleek electric sedan that probably cost more than Ethan's entire lifetime earnings. Clara drove with surprising aggression, weaving through traffic while Ethan called the hospital repeatedly, getting transferred from department to department without answers. "She's going to be fine," Clara said, but Ethan could hear the fear in her voice too. "Kids are resilient." "She's 8. She's tiny. What if—" Don't go there. Just focus on getting to her." They reached Mercy General in 15 minutes that felt like hours. Ethan was out of the car before it fully stopped, running through the emergency room entrance. Rosa was in the waiting area and she stood when she saw him. "They're examining her now. Room 7. The nurse said—" Ethan didn't wait to hear the rest. He pushed through doors marked staff only, ignoring protests from a security guard until he found room 7. Mia was sitting on an examination table, tears streaking her face, her left arm bent at a wrong angle. "Dad!" Her voice broke, and Ethan was beside her in 2 strides, gathering her carefully against his chest. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're okay." "It hurts," she sobbed. "I fell off the monkey bars and it hurts so much." A doctor appeared, a young woman with kind eyes. "Mr. Cole, I'm Dr. Patel. Your daughter has a fracture. Clean break of the radius, which is actually good news. We'll need to set it and cast it, but she should heal completely in 6 to 8 weeks. Ethan's knees went weak with relief. "She's okay?" "She's going to be fine. We'll give her something for the pain first." The next hour was a blur of x-rays and consent forms, and Mia trying to be brave while they set her arm. Clara appeared at some point, talking quietly with Rosa in the hallway. When they finally released Mia with a bright purple cast and a prescription for pain medication, it was nearly midnight. In the parking lot, Mia was already getting drowsy from the medication. "Dad?" she mumbled, leaning against him. "Is Miss Clara my friend too?" Clara, who was walking beside them, smiled. "I hope so. Is that okay with you?" "Yeah, you're nice, and you have a cool car." Mia yawned. "Can we get ice cream tomorrow?" "Absolutely," Ethan promised, though he suspected she wouldn't remember asking. Clara drove them home, Rosa too, since she'd come by bus. In the car, Mia fell asleep against Ethan's shoulder, her casted arm cradled carefully. He stroked her hair, overwhelmed by how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. "Thank you," he said quietly to Clara, "for driving us, for being there." "Of course." Clara glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "She's a great kid, Ethan. You've done an amazing job with her. I just keep her alive and hope I'm not screwing her up too badly." "That's basically all parenting is," Rosa chimed in, "keeping them alive and minimizing the therapy they'll need later." They all laughed softly, and for a moment the fear faded. Mia was okay. Everything else could wait. At the Meridian, Clara insisted on helping Ethan carry Mia upstairs. Together they got her into bed, still in her clothes because she was too deeply asleep to change. Ethan pulled a blanket over her, kissed her forehead, and stood watching her breathe for a long moment. In the kitchen, Clara and Rosa waited. Rosa hugged him fiercely. "She's okay," she whispered. "You're both okay." "This time," Ethan said. "But what about next time? What if I'm in a meeting I can't leave? What if—" "Then you call me," Rosa said firmly. "Or Clara, or anyone. You're not alone anymore, Ethan. Stop acting like you are." Clara nodded. "Rosa's right. You have people now. Use us." Ethan looked between these 2 women, one who'd been there through everything, and one who'd appeared in his life barely 3 weeks ago, and felt something in his chest loosen. "Thank you," he said again, inadequately. Rosa left, needing to get home. Clara lingered, helping Ethan clean up the small chaos of their emergency departure that morning. They worked in silence, and it felt natural, comfortable. "I should go," Clara finally said. "Let you rest." "Clara?" Ethan stopped her at the door. "Today, in the car, you said kids are resilient. Do you want kids someday?" She looked surprised by the question. "I don't know. I always thought I would eventually, but I kept putting it off, too busy building the company, too focused on success. Now I'm almost 40, and I've missed my chance." "You haven't missed anything. 40 isn't old," says the 32-year-old, Clara said wryly. "I'm 34, actually, and I'm saying it as someone who became a parent at 26 and still has no idea what he's doing." Ethan smiled. "There's no perfect time, Clara. If you want it, you make it happen." She studied his face for a long moment. "Is that what you did? Made it happen?" "Mia happened to me, honestly, but I wouldn't change it for anything." He glanced toward his daughter's room. "She's the best thing I've ever done. The only thing I'm proud of." "You should be proud of more than that," Clara said softly. You should be proud of how you fight for people, how you stayed honest when it would have been easier to take the bribe, how you're changing an entire project just by insisting we see residents as human beings. Ethan felt heat rise to his face. I'm just doing what's right. That's exactly why you should be proud. Clara reached out, squeezed his hand once, then let go. Get some sleep. We have a community meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow? I need to stay with Mia. Then bring her. We'll make it kid-friendly. Rosa's daughter can come too. After Clara left, Ethan checked on Mia one more time. She was sprawled across the bed, her casted arms sticking up awkwardly, mouth open in sleep. Perfect and alive, and his. He finally let himself feel the terror he'd been suppressing since Rosa's call, the awful what-ifs, the knowledge that he could lose her in a moment. But he also felt gratitude for doctors and hospitals and friends who drove you there without hesitation. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Mia's lucky to have you. Sleep well. See. He typed back, she's lucky to have you too. Both of us are. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, that's the nicest thing anyone said to me in years. Ethan fell asleep on the couch, too exhausted to make it to his bed, and dreamed of purple casts and community gardens and a future that might actually work out. The next morning, Mia woke up fascinated by her cast and disappointed she'd missed most of the hospital experience. Did I get stitches? She asked hopefully. No stitches, just a broken bone. Can my friend sign my cast? Absolutely. They made it to the community meeting by noon, Mia with her arm in a sling, proudly showing off her cast to anyone who looked. Maria, Rosa's daughter, drew a butterfly on it with colored markers. Mrs. Chen signed her name in Chinese characters. Even Mr. Martinez cracked a smile and drew a tiny chess piece. Clara presented the updated plans, now incorporating feedback from previous meetings. The community gardens were both ground level and rooftop. The common rooms were larger, with space for activities. The units themselves would be renovated with input from current tenants about layouts and features. This is your home, Clara said. We're just helping you make it better. Anything we do needs your approval. After the meeting, several tenants approached Ethan, thanking him for fighting for them. One elderly man, whom Ethan recognized from the 4th floor, but had never really talked to, gripped his hand tightly. My grandson's in college, the man said, studying engineering. When he heard about what you're doing, maintenance worker to director, he called me crying. Said if you could do it, maybe he could too. You're giving people hope, son. Don't underestimate that. Ethan didn't know what to say. He'd never thought of himself as inspirational. He was just a dad trying to keep his kid housed. But maybe that's what hope looked like. Not grand gestures, but ordinary people refusing to give up. Clara found him afterward, watching Mia and Maria race their wheelchairs they'd fashioned from office chairs down the hallway. Good meeting, she said. Great meeting. People are actually starting to believe this might work. It will work. We'll make it work. Clara smiled. Together. Together, Ethan agreed. And standing there in the Meridian's community room, surrounded by people who were starting to trust again, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope. Certainty. They were going to do this. They were going to save these homes, these families, this community, because they had to, because it was right. And sometimes that was enough. 3 months into the renovation project, reality hit harder than anyone expected. The construction crews discovered asbestos in the Meridian's basement, hidden behind walls that hadn't been opened in decades. Removal would add 6 months to the timeline and $2 million to the budget. The day the report landed on Clara's desk, Ethan watched her face drain of color. This could kill the whole project, she said quietly, staring at the numbers. The board's already nervous about costs. This might be the excuse they need to revert to demolition. Then we don't give them the excuse. Ethan leaned over her desk, studying the report. What if we phase it differently? Start with buildings that don't have asbestos issues, show progress, build momentum. By the time we have to present this problem, we'll have success stories to back us up. Clara looked up at him, hope flickering in her eyes. That could work, but it means displacing different families first, changing the entire sequence. So we asked them, we're supposed to be doing this with community input, right? Let's actually do it. They called an emergency meeting that evening. Nearly 200 people packed into the Meridian's community room, anxiety thick in the air. Word had spread that there was a problem, and people feared the worst. Clara stood at the front, and Ethan saw her hands shake slightly as she held the microphone. Thank you for coming on short notice. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. We've hit a complication. She explained the asbestos, the cost increase, the timeline delay. People's faces fell, and Ethan could see the trust they'd been building start to crumble. Mrs. Chen looked like she might cry. Mr. Martinez's expression hardened into familiar cynicism. But, Clara continued, we're not giving up. We're asking for your help to solve this together. We can change which buildings we renovate first, minimize disruption, and keep the project moving forward. It'll take longer, but we'll get there. How much longer? Someone called out. 5 years instead of 4, maybe 6 if we hit more surprises. The room erupted in worried conversation. A young mother stood up, baby on her hip. 6 years? My son will be in 2nd grade by then. How do we plan our lives around that kind of uncertainty? I know it's not ideal, Clara said, but the alternative is demolition, is starting over somewhere else, somewhere you can't afford, somewhere far from everything you know. I'm asking you to be patient with us, to trust that we're doing everything we can. Why should we trust you? Mr. Martinez stood, his voice bitter. You're rich. If this fails, you move on to the next project. We're the ones who lose everything. Clara flinched, but before she could respond, Ethan stepped forward. He's right, he said, and the room went quiet. Ms. Vance has money and options. If this fails, she'll be fine. But you know who else loses everything if this fails? Me. My daughter. We live here too. In apartment 7B, same as always. He looked around the room, meeting eyes. I know most of you. You've seen me fixing your heaters, unclogging your drains, carrying groceries for Mrs. Chen when her hands hurt. I'm not some corporate guy making promises I don't have to keep. I'm your neighbor. And I'm telling you, Clara's the real deal. She's fighting for us. But she can't do it alone. We have to fight too. We have to be patient and flexible and willing to deal with setbacks. Mia, sitting in the front row with her casted arm, raised her good hand. Can I say something? Ethan nodded, curious. She stood up, small and serious. Miss Clara bought me ice cream when my arm hurt, and she stayed at the hospital even though she didn't have to. My dad says you can tell who people really are when things are hard. Miss Clara's nice even when things are hard. I think we should trust her. The simplicity of it, the 8-year-old logic, broke through the tension. People smiled. A few laughed softly. Mrs. Chen was definitely crying now, but they were different tears. Out of the mouths of babes, she said, her voice wavering. The child is right. I vote we trust them. Others murmured agreement. Not everyone. Some people still looked skeptical, still needed convincing. But it was enough. The room didn't revolt. The project survived. Afterward, Clara knelt down to Mia's level. Thank you for defending me. You're my friend, Mia said simply. That's what friends do. Clara's eyes went suspiciously bright. She pulled Mia into a careful hug, mindful of the casted arm. You're absolutely right. That night, Ethan's phone rang as he was putting Mia to bed. Clara, her voice tight. Can you come to my office? Now? What's wrong? Everything. Please, I need... Her voice broke. I need someone who understands. Ethan called Rosa, who came over immediately to stay with sleeping Mia. 20 minutes later, he was in Clara's office, finding her standing at the window, staring out at the city lights. The board held a vote tonight, she said without turning around. Emergency session. They want to cap the renovation budget at the original $3 billion. No overruns, no flexibility. If we hit that limit, we stop and demolish whatever's left. Ethan's stomach sank. Can they do that? They just did. 6 votes to 5. Patricia tried to argue for me, but she couldn't swing enough support. Clara finally turned, and her face was devastated. The asbestos alone will eat up most of our contingency budget. One more surprise like that, and we're done. I'll have to demolish your home anyway, and it'll be worse because people will have trusted me first. So we don't have any more surprises. Ethan, these are 50-year-old buildings. There will be more surprises. Well, then we get creative. Find ways to cut costs without cutting corners. He moved to stand beside her at the window. You didn't come this far to give up now. I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep fighting. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Every day there's another crisis, another obstacle. The contractors are behind schedule. Materials costs keep rising. Half my executive team thinks I've lost my mind. And now the board is actively trying to sabotage the project. They're not sabotaging it. They're scared. Scared of change, scared of risk, scared of doing something that doesn't have guaranteed returns. Ethan touched her shoulder gently. But you knew this wouldn't be easy. You gave up control of your company shares for this. You can't quit now. What if I'm wrong? What if demolition and rebuilding really is better? Faster, more efficient, cleaner? Better for who? Not for Mrs. Chen, not for Mr. Martinez, not for the 200 families who will be displaced. Ethan turned her to face him. You asked me once why I didn't take Brennan's bribe. You want to know the real reason? Because I looked at my daughter and realized I wanted her to grow up knowing her father chose integrity over money. That some things matter more than the easy path. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. I'm so tired, Ethan. I don't remember the last time I slept through the night. Then rest. Take a day off. Let other people carry the weight for a while. I can't. If I stop, everything falls apart. No, Ethan said firmly. If you burn out, everything falls apart. There's a difference. He made a decision. Come on, we're leaving. What? I have work? It'll be there tomorrow. Right now, you need a break. He practically dragged her out of the office, ignoring her protests. In the parking garage, he took her car keys. I'm driving. You don't even know where we're going. Neither do you. That's the point. He drove aimlessly at first, just getting her away from the office, from the pressure, from the constant weight of decisions. Eventually, he found himself heading toward the water. There was a small park along the harbor, mostly empty at night, with benches overlooking the bay. They sat in silence for a while, watching boats drift past, their lights reflecting on dark water. Clara's breathing gradually slowed, tension leaking from her shoulders. My mother used to bring me here, she said finally. When I was little and she'd finished her cleaning shift, we'd sit and eat gas station sandwiches and she'd tell me stories about all the places we'd go someday. Paris, Tokyo, Cairo. She never made it to any of them. Cancer killed her before she could save enough for even one trip. I'm sorry, Ethan said. She worked herself to death, basically. 3 jobs, constant stress, no health care until it was too late. Clara's voice was thick with old grief. I built Vance Industries partly to honor her, to prove that people like us could succeed. But somewhere along the way, I became exactly what she was working for. Another rich person she'd have to clean up after. Another CEO who'd never noticed the janitor. You noticed me. Only because we almost died together. Clara laughed bitterly. What does it say about me that it took a near-death experience to see the people around me? It says you're human, and that you're capable of growth. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter against the cold harbor breeze. Most people never change, Clara. They double down on their mistakes, justify their blind spots. You didn't. That counts for something. They sat until nearly midnight, talking about everything and nothing. Clara told him about her childhood, about watching her mother's hands crack and bleed from harsh cleaning chemicals. Ethan told her about Rachel leaving, about the morning he woke up to find her gone, and a note on the kitchen counter that just said, I'm sorry. Do you miss her? Clara asked. Sometimes. Mostly I miss who I thought she was. The woman I married wouldn't have abandoned her daughter, but that woman was apparently always fiction. Ethan picked at a loose thread on his jacket. What about you? Ever been married? Engaged once, to another tech CEO. We were perfect on paper. Same ambitions, same work ethic, same social circle. Turned out we had nothing else. We were business partners who occasionally slept together. When I realized I felt nothing at his proposal, I knew I couldn't go through with it. When was this? 8 years ago. Haven't seriously dated since. Work became my relationship. Clara smiled sadly. My mother would be so disappointed. She wanted grandkids, a son-in-law, Sunday dinners. Instead, she got a daughter who builds empires and eats takeout alone in her office. It's not too late, Ethan said, for any of it. Clara looked at him, and something shifted in the air between them. A charge, a possibility, a door opening that had been closed before. Ethan, she started, then stopped. I should get you home. Mia probably misses you. The moment passed, but its ghost lingered during the drive back to the Meridian. Ethan wanted to say something, to acknowledge whatever that was, but he didn't know how. Clara was his boss, his ally in this impossible project. Complicating that with personal feelings seemed reckless. But when she dropped him off and their hands brushed as he returned her keys, the electric contact said everything words couldn't. The next morning brought new challenges. A contractor pulled out, citing budget concerns. A materials supplier doubled their prices, claiming shortages. The city inspector found code violations that required immediate attention. Each problem felt designed to bleed the project dry, to push them toward that $3 billion cap. Ethan spent his days putting out fires, literally and metaphorically. A small electrical fire in the Meridian's 4th floor required emergency repairs. A burst pipe flooded 3 apartments. A structural support beam tested positive for rot and needed replacement. Through it all, Clara remained steady, but Ethan could see the toll it was taking. She lost weight, developed dark circles under her eyes, started chain-drinking coffee like it was oxygen. 6 weeks before the budget cap deadline, they had a breakthrough. One of the architects discovered that they could save $800,000 by using a new sustainable material for insulation, cheaper, more effective, and better for the environment. It was the kind of win they desperately needed. Clara called Ethan into her office, grinning for the first time in weeks. "Look at this! We might actually pull this off." "Don't jinx it," Ethan said, but he was smiling too. "I'm serious. If we can find 3 or 4 more innovations like this, we stay under budget and finish the project." She pulled up spreadsheets showing him the numbers. "We could actually do this, Ethan. We could save everyone's homes." Her enthusiasm was infectious. They worked late into the evening, brainstorming cost-saving measures that didn't compromise quality. By midnight, they'd identified $2 million in potential savings through creative solutions and vendor negotiations. "We should celebrate," Clara said, leaning back in her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. "It's midnight, and I'm pretty sure the only thing open is a gas station." "Perfect. My mother loved gas station food, remember?" They ended up at a 24-hour convenience store, buying terrible hot dogs and fountain drinks, sitting in Claire's car in the parking lot like teenagers. It was absurd and perfect, and Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed this much. "This is definitely not how billionaire CEOs usually celebrate," he said. "I'm not a usual billionaire CEO." Clara took a bite of her hot dog, made a face. "Oh God, this is awful." "That's the point. It's supposed to be awful." "My mother had terrible taste in food. My dad put ketchup on steak. We all have our flaws." They sat in comfortable silence, eating terrible food and watching the occasional car pass. Then Clara said, "Ethan, I need to tell you something." His heart stuttered. "Okay. I'm falling for you. Have been for weeks. Maybe since the elevator, I don't know. And I know it's inappropriate and complicated and probably a terrible idea given our working relationship, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel it." She looked at him, vulnerable and brave. "Tell me I'm not alone in this." Ethan's mind raced. This was his boss. This was the CEO of a billion-dollar company. This was also the woman who'd risked everything for his community, who'd stayed at the hospital with his daughter, who'd believed in him when no one else did. "You're not alone," he said quietly. Clara let out a shaky breath. Okay, good. Because I wasn't sure if I was reading the signals right, and I thought maybe—" He kissed her. It wasn't planned or smooth or anything like the movies. It was awkward and tasted like cheap hot dogs and fountain coke, and it was absolutely perfect. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Clara laughed. "That was terrible timing?" "I was going to say worth the wait." She touched his face gently. "But yes, also terrible timing. We're in the middle of the most important project either of us has ever worked on. This complicates everything. So we keep it separate, professional at work, personal outside work." "Can we do that?" "We'll figure it out," Ethan said. "We figured out everything else." They didn't tell anyone immediately. At work, they maintained professional distance, though Ethan caught Clara smiling at him when she thought no one was looking. Evenings, after Mia was asleep, they'd meet at the harbor or take walks through the neighborhood, talking for hours. Mia figured it out within a week. "Dad, are you dating Miss Clara?" Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. "What makes you say that? You smile at your phone a lot, and you've been happy, like really happy, not just pretend happy." Mia looked up from her cereal. "Is that okay? If you date her? Is it okay with you?" Mia considered this seriously. "She's nice, and she makes you happy, so yeah, it's okay. But if you get married, I want to be in the wedding." "We're not getting married," Ethan said quickly. "We're just spending time together. That's what dating is, Dad. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't listen." But she was grinning, pleased with herself. Rosa found out next, cornering Ethan at the Meridian one afternoon. "You and Clara Vance? Really? Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes. You light up when you see her. She lights up when she sees you. It's adorable and kind of sickening." Rosa studied him. "You happy?" "Terrified mostly. But yeah, underneath the terror, I'm happy." "Good. You deserve happiness." She hugged him. "Just don't screw it up by being a typical man." "I don't even know what that means." "Neither do men. That's the problem." 2 months before the project's first phase completion, disaster struck. The city announced new building codes, retroactive to all current renovation projects. Meeting the new standards would cost an additional $1.5 million, money they didn't have. The board called for an emergency meeting. Ethan sat beside Clara, watching the faces around the table. They'd lost. Everyone knew it. They were over budget, behind schedule, and now facing impossible new requirements. Richard Ashford cleared his throat. "Clara, I think we all know where this is heading. We're $300,000 from the cap, and this new code requirement puts us permanently over. I'm sorry, but we have to consider demolition." "No," Clara's voice was steel. "We've come too far." "We don't have a choice," Patricia said gently. "Unless you can find $1.5 million in the next 30 days, the board has no option but to terminate the renovation and proceed with the original plan." Clara stood abruptly. "Then give me 30 days." She stormed out, Ethan following. In her office, she was pacing, practically vibrating with frustration. "Where are we going to find that kind of money?" she demanded. "We've cut every cost we can. We've negotiated with every vendor. There's nothing left." "What about your personal funds?" "I already put in everything I could without completely bankrupting myself. The trust has strict rules about how much I can contribute directly." She slumped into her chair. "This is it. We're done." Ethan refused to accept that. "What if we went public? Crowdfunding, donations, community support. $1.5 million from donations?" "Ethan, that's possible," he interrupted. "People care about this project. The story's been all over the news. What if we asked for help?" Clara looked at him like he'd suggested flying to the moon. But slowly, thoughtfully, her expression changed. "It would be humiliating, admitting we failed to budget properly. Or it would be honest, showing that even with the best intentions, we need community support to fight corporate interests." Ethan leaned on her desk. "You've always said this was about people, not profit. Prove it. Let people be part of the solution." They launched the campaign that night. A simple crowdfunding page with a video of Clara and Ethan explaining the situation, showing the renovated sections, introducing the families who'd benefit. No corporate polish, just raw honesty. "We need your help," Clara said into the camera. "Not because we mismanaged funds, but because doing the right thing is expensive. Because choosing people over profit has a cost, and we can't pay it alone." They set a goal of $1.5 million in 30 days. It seemed impossible. The first day, they raised $12,000. The second day, $25,000. By the end of the first week, they had $200,000. Significant, but nowhere near enough. Then something unexpected happened. A tech billionaire Clara had gone to college with saw the campaign and donated $500,000. In the comments, he wrote, "Because Clara Vance is one of the few people I trust to actually use this money the right way." Other CEOs followed. Small donations poured in from regular people. A retired maintenance worker sent $50 with a note. For the guy who proves we matter. A single mother sent 20, because my kids deserve safe housing too. The media picked up the story. National news covered it. Local politicians, who'd been silent before, suddenly wanted to be involved, offering city grants and tax incentives. With 1 week left, they hit $1 million. With 3 days left, $1.3 million. On the final day, they needed 200,000 more. Ethan watched the numbers climb, refreshing the page obsessively. Clara sat beside him in his apartment. She'd started spending more evenings there, becoming part of his and Mia's routine. Mia was on the floor doing homework, periodically checking the laptop over their shoulders. At 11 p.m., they were still 50,000 short. At 11:30, 30,000. At 11:50, 10,000. At 11:58 p.m., a donation came through. Anonymous. $100,000. They hit the goal with 2 minutes to spare. Clara burst into tears. Ethan held her while she sobbed into his shoulder, releasing months of stress and fear and desperate hope. Mia abandoned her homework to hug them both. "We did it," Clara kept saying. "Oh my God, we actually did it." The board meeting the next day was tense until Clara presented the numbers. Richard Ashford actually smiled. "Well," he said, "I have to admit, I didn't think it was possible. Congratulations, Clara. You've earned the right to finish this project." Construction resumed with renewed energy. The contractor who'd pulled out came back, impressed by the public support. Materials suppliers offered discounts. The city inspector suddenly became cooperative. Slowly, impossibly, the buildings transformed. New windows gleamed, roofs no longer leaked. Heating systems actually heated. The community gardens began to bloom, tended by residents who finally believed in the future. 9 months after the crowdfunding success, Phase 1 was complete. The Meridian Tower reopened with a celebration that filled every floor. Mrs. Chen walked through her renovated apartment with tears streaming down her face, touching walls that were now properly insulated, opening windows that actually opened, turning on lights that worked reliably. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "After all these years, it's finally beautiful." Mr. Martinez, still gruff but softer around the edges, found Ethan in the crowd. "You know what? I was wrong about you, about her, about all of it. Thank you for not giving up on us." The Santos twins, now toddlers, ran through the community room squealing with delight. Young families moved into renovated units, paying rent they could actually afford. The building hummed with life and possibility. Clara stood on the rooftop garden. Ground-level gardens had been completed too, but the rooftop was her favorite, looking out at the neighborhood. Ethan found her there as the sun set, painting everything gold. "You did it," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." "That's objectively false. You're a billionaire genius." "I'm a billionaire who was so focused on innovation that I forgot about people. You reminded me what matters." She turned in his arms. "I've been thinking about something." "Dangerous activity." She swatted him playfully. "I'm serious. I want to expand this. Take the Horizon model, real renovation, community input, affordable housing, and apply it to other cities. We proved it works. Why stop here?" "Because it's exhausting and you aged 10 years in the past 12 months? I aged 3 years, maximum. And I'd do it again." Clara's eyes shone with excitement. "Think about it, Ethan. We could create a template, teach other cities how to revitalize without displacement. You could lead the community integration side, travel to different projects, train other directors. What about Mia? Bring her, or travel during summers and breaks, or..." Clara hesitated. "Or I could stay here more, be home more, if you wanted that." Ethan understood what she was really asking. "Are we talking about work or something else?" "Both, either. I don't know." She looked nervous, which was rare for Clara. "I love you, Ethan. I probably have since that elevator. I love Mia. I love the life you've built, the person you are. And I want to be part of it, if you'll let me." His heart felt too big for his chest. "I love you too. But you need to know, I come with complications. A daughter who'll always be my first priority. An ex-wife who's legally still entitled to custody if she ever bothers to claim it. A lifetime of financial instability that makes me paranoid about money." I come with complications too, Clara said. A company that still needs me. A tendency to work too much. Control issues I'm actively working on. And a fear of elevators that may never fully go away. We're kind of a mess. We're perfectly imperfect. She kissed him softly. So what do you say? Want to be messy together? Yeah, Ethan said. Yeah, I really do. 1 year later, they stood in the same rooftop garden for a very different celebration. The Horizon 2.0 project had been renamed The Haven, Claire's idea, honoring her mother's wish to provide safe havens for working families. All 5 buildings were complete, housing over 800 families in affordable, sustainable, community-driven housing. But today was about something smaller and more personal. Mia stood between them in a purple dress that matched her long-heeled arm cast, holding a small bouquet. Are you sure I can't say the vows? She asked for the 3rd time. You're the maid of honor, Clara said, straightening Mia's flower crown. That's even more important. Fine, but I'm giving a speech at the reception. We're counting on it, Ethan said. The ceremony was small. Rosa and her daughter, Mrs. Chen, Mr. Martinez, the Santos family, Patricia Chen from the board, and a handful of other friends and colleagues. Not fancy or elaborate. Just people who mattered, gathering to witness 2 imperfect people promising to build a life together. Richard Ashford, who'd surprisingly become an ally, officiated. I've known Claire Vance for 15 years, he said, and I've never seen her happier or more human than she's been this past year. Ethan, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I just love her, Ethan said simply. That's all I know how to do. Clara's eyes welled up. You're not supposed to make me cry before the vows. Too late. They exchanged rings they'd picked out together. Simple bands, nothing ostentatious. When Richard pronounced them married, Mia cheered louder than anyone, and the small crowd applauded. At the reception in the community room, catered by Rosa's restaurant naturally, Mia did give a speech. She stood on a chair, microphone in hand, completely unself-conscious. When my dad and Clara got stuck in the elevator, I was really scared, she said. I thought maybe he wouldn't come home, but he did, and he brought Clara with him, and she's been coming home ever since. My mom left when I was little, and I don't really remember her, but Clara's here. She helps with my homework and comes to my science fairs and teaches me about running businesses even though I'm only 9. She chose us, and that's better than anything. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Clara was openly crying, not even trying to hide it. Ethan pulled both his girls into a hug, his daughter and his wife, and felt complete in a way he'd never imagined possible. Later, dancing with Clara while Mia spun in circles with Maria, Ethan said, "Remember when you hated me? When I was just the maintenance guy from the building you were going to demolish? I never hated you, I just didn't see you yet." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. Best broken elevator of my life. Pretty sure it's the only broken elevator of your life. Thank God for that. They swayed to music, surrounded by people whose homes they'd saved, in a building that represented everything they'd fought for. Not perfection. There were still problems, still challenges, still work to be done. But possibility. Hope. Community. Mrs. Chen approached them, moving slowly with her walker. "I wanted to give you something," she said, handing Clara a small box. Inside was a jade bracelet, delicate and clearly old. "This was my mother's," Mrs. Chen explained. "She wore it when she came to this country with nothing. She told me to give it to someone who understands that home isn't about the building. It's about the people inside it. I think you understand that now." Clara slipped the bracelet on, tears streaming freely. "I'll treasure it. Thank you." After Mrs. Chen moved away, Ethan kissed his wife's temple. "You changed her life." "We changed her life, and she changed mine." Clara looked around the room, at the families, the community, the home they'd all built together. A building isn't smart unless it has a heart. I really believe that now. Mia tugged on Clara's dress. "Can we have cake now? I'm starving, and I've been very patient." "Cake it is," Clara said, laughing. They cut the cake together, the 3 of them, a family cobbled together from broken elevators and impossible projects, and the stubborn refusal to give up. Not the family any of them had planned, but the one they needed. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Ethan found himself alone on the rooftop again, looking out at the neighborhood. The Haven buildings were lit up against the night sky, each window representing a family, a story, a life that had been protected. Clara joined him, still wearing her wedding dress, the jade bracelet catching the moonlight. "What are you thinking about?" "How none of this should have worked. The odds were impossible. We should have failed 100 times." "But we didn't." "But we didn't," Ethan agreed, "because you were crazy enough to try." "Because we were crazy enough to try," Clara corrected. "I was just the CEO with a guilt complex. You were the one who made me see what mattered." "So we're both crazy. Perfectly crazy." She leaned against him. "Think we can do it again? In other cities?" "Absolutely not. It was horrible and stressful, and I aged terribly." "You aged 3 years maximum." "I aged 5 years minimum. I have gray hairs now. Look." He pointed to his temple. "Those are distinguished. I like them." Clara kissed the gray hairs. "So is that a no?" Ethan looked at his wife, his brilliant, stubborn, wonderful wife, and smiled. "It's a ask me again in 6 months after I've recovered from this project." "I'll put it on my calendar." They stood together as the last guests trickled out, as the building settled into nighttime quiet, as their new life began in the place where everything had almost ended. A broken elevator had brought them together, but it was their choice to stay together, to fight together, to build something meaningful together. Mia appeared in the rooftop doorway, yawning. "Dad? Clara? Can we go home now? My feet hurt." "Of course, sweetheart," Ethan said. They walked down together, using the stairs because Clara still didn't fully trust elevators and probably never would, to apartment 7B. It wasn't fancy or large, but it was theirs. Clara had officially moved in last month, bringing her few personal possessions and integrating seamlessly into their small space. After Mia was tucked into bed, Clara and Ethan collapsed on the couch, exhausted and happy. "We're married," Clara said wonderingly. "I'm married to a maintenance worker turned director." "I'm married to a billionaire CEO who's afraid of elevators." "It's ridiculous." "It's perfect," Ethan corrected. And it was. Not because everything was easy or solved or complete. The Haven still had work to do. Other buildings needed saving. Mia would grow up and present new challenges. Clara's company would demand attention. Life would be complicated and messy and full of obstacles. But they'd face it together. They'd proven they could survive broken elevators and corporate opposition and impossible budgets. They could survive anything. Clara fell asleep on Ethan's shoulder, the jade bracelet on her wrist catching the soft lamplight. Ethan stayed awake a while longer, listening to his daughter breathe in the next room, feeling his wife's heartbeat against his chest, and thinking about how sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. Sometimes you have to get stuck in an elevator with a stranger to find out who you're meant to become. Sometimes the person you least expect turns out to be exactly who you need. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, home isn't just a building, it's the people who refuse to give up on each other, who fight for what's right even when it's hard, who choose love over convenience and community over profit. The Meridian Tower, now the Haven, stood solid in the night, its renovated walls sheltering hundreds of families who would have been displaced. In apartment 7B, a maintenance worker turned director held his sleeping wife and listened to his daughter's dreams and felt richer than any amount of money could make him, because he had what mattered. He had home. He had love. He had purpose. And it all started with a broken elevator and a choice to save the person standing next to him, even though she was supposed to be his enemy. Sometimes the greatest buildings aren't the ones we construct with steel and glass. They're the ones we build with courage and compassion and the stubborn belief that everyone deserves a place to call home. Every great design, Clara had once said, starts with a human story. This was theirs. And it was only the beginning.